In the sun-scorched deserts of Arizona, a single gas station stop would ignite a firestorm unlike anything the quiet town of Shadow Creek had ever seen. When 3 outlaw bikers from the feared Desert Wolves gang tried to intimidate a lone woman on a sport bike, they believed it would be just another easy shakedown. What they didn't realize was that Rachel Morrison, retired Navy SEAL and one of the deadliest combat veterans in U.S. history, had zero intention of backing down. Their failed attempt at simple intimidation would soon unravel a $100 million criminal enterprise, exposing a corrupt police force and plunging an unsuspecting desert community into a high-stakes battle for survival. This is the explosive story of how one fateful encounter at Johnson's gas station lit the spark that would bring a ruthless gang and an entire criminal network to its knees. Grab a seat and follow us into Chapter 1, where the relentless Arizona sun and the unassuming pumps of a rural gas station set the stage for a showdown that will shake Shadow Creek to its core. Get ready for a tale of grit, courage, and retribution, because in this town, mocking the wrong woman can change the game forever. Quick pause before we continue. Welcome to Fabled Frames. Please tell us where you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe because tomorrow's story is mind-blowing. An unrelenting sun poured its molten light across the desert highway, rendering every metal surface scorching to the touch. Captain Rachel Morrison throttled back on her Kawasaki Ninja as she pulled into Johnson's gas station on the outskirts of Shadow Creek, Arizona. She had been riding for hours under a brutal heat that made the red rock formations shimmer in the distance. In her rearview mirror, she caught the glare of passing vehicles, each a transient piece of the desert tapestry. Shadow Creek wasn't big. In fact, it was more a speck on the map than a proper town. But it served as a gateway to remote areas of Arizona that rarely made the tourist brochures. Rachel was here on personal business. She needed to get away from the crowds and expectations. For the last 15 years, she had been part of the Navy's most elite unit, SEAL Team 6. Missions that never made the headlines had left an indelible mark on her psyche. A single gunfight in a far-flung desert might last mere minutes, but its echoes persisted for a lifetime. She swung her right leg over the bike and removed her full-face helmet. Her raven-black hair, cut into a practical, shoulder-length style, clung to her sweat-damp neck. Clad in black riding leathers that bore the scuffs of hard use, she looked like a typical speed enthusiast. One glance into her calm gray eyes, however, would tell any keen observer there was more to her story. Rachel quickly surveyed her surroundings. 15 years of special operations had drilled that habit into her. She noted the makeshift security camera above the gas station's entrance, a battered relic from decades past, with a spider web forming over the lens. Near the side of the building, an elderly man in a wide-brimmed hat loaded crates of what appeared to be produce into the back of a blue Ford pickup. The only other vehicles were 2 dusty trucks with tinted windows, their occupants unseen. She strolled into the small convenience store. The cold blast of air conditioning was a welcome shock to her system. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, revealing a narrow space stuffed with jerky, chips, soda coolers, and cheap tourist trinkets, postcards of Arizona deserts, novelty shot glasses, and more. There were only a few people inside, a mother with her 2 kids rummaging through the candy aisle and a bored teenager behind the counter, flipping through a magazine. Without a word, Rachel grabbed a bottle of water from one of the coolers and placed a $5 bill on the counter next to it. She lifted the bottle to her lips, relishing the cool rush down her throat. She'd planned on making a quick stop, fuel up, hydrate, and keep moving. But fate had other plans. She spotted them through the convenience store's glass door, 3 bikers rolling in on heavy cruisers, each wearing a black leather vest emblazoned with a snarling wolf's head on the back. The words Desert Wolves curved around the patch. Though Rachel was new to Arizona, she'd heard more than enough about the Desert Wolves in her travels. They had a reputation for brutality, drug running, and intimidation that stretched all the way into Texas and Nevada. The first biker who dismounted was tall, built like a refrigerator, with tattoos covering his arms up to his knuckles. The second was wiry, sporting a patchy beard, and had a restless energy that suggested substances were fueling him. The third was older, maybe in his late 40s, face lined with hard living, his long gray hair in a ponytail. Each wore mirrored aviator sunglasses. If intimidation was the goal, they succeeded, at least with the unsuspecting onlooker. Rachel watched them swagger into the store, boots clomping against the linoleum floor. The mother grabbed her kids and hurriedly shuffled them away toward the cashier. The teenager behind the counter stood a bit straighter, setting aside his magazine. Rachel didn't move from her spot by the cooler, she simply took another swallow of water, her posture deceptively relaxed. When they first noticed her, they exchanged smirks. The big one with the refrigerator build stepped forward, halting a mere foot away. His name patch read Crank. Crank looked her up and down as if she were a curiosity in a roadside attraction. Rachel's riding leathers didn't scream Navy SEAL, nor did her calm expression. As far as he was concerned, she was just some woman on a flashy sport bike, a toy he might push around for entertainment. "Nice ride out there," Crank said, voice heavy with sarcasm. "You racing or something, sweetheart?" Rachel met his eyes. "Just passing through." She felt the other two drifting closer, corralling her. In her peripheral vision, she saw the wiry one, whose patch read Spider, step to her right. The older one, Torque, hung back a bit, eyeing her with a cold wariness that suggested he was used to reading people. Rachel had spent enough time in tense environments to recognize the dynamic. They were sizing her up, looking for an advantage or a reason to escalate. "Desert wolves, huh?" Rachel said, eyeing their patches. "Never heard of you." She was lying, but that lie served a purpose. It unnerved them to think someone truly didn't care about their reputation. Their smirks wavered slightly. Spider's fingers twitched as if itching for violence. Crank glanced at Spider, then back at Rachel. "Ma'am," the teenager behind the counter cut in, looking at her with concern, "did you need anything else?" The tension in the store was thick. The mother and kids had already backed themselves into a corner, uncertain if they should flee or wait. Even the overhead fluorescent lights seemed to hum more intensely. Rachel placed the half-empty water bottle on a nearby shelf. Her voice was measured, low. "I'm fine, thanks. Just needed to cool off." "Cool off, huh?" Crank leaned in. His breath smelled of cigarettes and stale beer. "How about you and I step outside, have ourselves a chat, see if we can help each other, sugar?" Rachel's pulse remained steady, but memories of countless operations flooded her mind, hostile territory, cornered by armed adversaries. Only this time she wasn't carrying a suppressed carbine or wearing ballistic armor. Still, she had no intention of allowing these men to dominate the situation. Spider clucked his tongue. "Don't ignore my buddy, lady. Bad manners to disrespect a desert wolf." Torque finally spoke, voice gravelly. "Let's not do something we'll regret. This lady's got a nice bike, that's all. We can admire it, right?" The presence of a voice of reason among them was interesting. Rachel guessed Torque was the one with more experience, the one more apt to read subtle clues. She watched his gaze flick to the toned muscles in her forearms, to the slight bulge near her waist that might hint at a concealed firearm. His eyes narrowed. Still, none of them stepped away. They wanted a reaction. They wanted her to show fear. But in Rachel's line of work, fear was a luxury. She had learned to either master it or succumb to it. She pointedly turned her back on the trio, exposing her side, not her front, and walked toward the exit. It was a calculated move, an insult to their posturing. A strong gust of desert wind hit her as she swung open the glass door. Crank's voice followed her outside. "I'm talking to you, girl. Don't you walk away." She heard the beep of the door chime as they spilled out after her. The mother and kids waited inside, wide-eyed, while the teenage cashier frantically reached for the phone under the counter. Rachel stopped next to her motorcycle, one glove dangling from the handlebar. The local time was just past noon, the sun high overhead. She turned around slowly, letting her eyes lock with Crank. "Listen, I don't have business with you. I'm just passing through. Maybe do yourselves a favor and mind your own." Spider, twitchy as ever, snorted laughter. "Well, maybe we got business with you. We don't like people disrespecting the wolves. We run these roads." Rachel flicked a glance toward the older man, Torque. He watched carefully, though he said nothing. Rachel understood his silence for what it was, an assessment. He was trying to gauge whether it was wise to pick a fight with this woman who didn't appear rattled by their aggression. Crank, not as perceptive, took a step closer. He was now only a foot away from Rachel. She could smell his sweat. "You might think you're a hotshot on that crotch rocket, but I got a lesson for you. This here is desert wolf territory." Rachel met him with a flat, unblinking stare. "You have exactly one chance to turn around and walk away. His laugh was an ugly bark. Spider laughed too, a high-pitched cackle. Torque stood silent, his hand resting on the butt of a knife sheathed at his belt. And in that moment, Rachel made a decision. She had tried for peaceful disengagement, but these men were determined to escalate. Old instincts awoke within her, the ingrained reflexes of years spent neutralizing threats in chaotic environments. At lightning speed, she pivoted and delivered a punishing elbow strike to Crank's temple. The big man didn't even have time to register what was happening. His knees buckled and he went down hard, gasping for breath as he clutched his head. Spider snarled, reaching behind his back. A metallic glint flashed in the desert sun. Rachel slammed her boot into his wrist, sending the gun skittering across the pavement. A second kick to his abdomen doubled him over with a choked cry. Before he could recover, she trapped his head and introduced it to her knee. His body sagged. Torque took a calculated step back, eyes burning with both fear and surprise. Rachel's movements were too clean, too precise. She looked like she'd done this 1,000 times. Maybe more. She turned her attention to him. He hesitated, caught between the desire to stand his ground as a wolf and the uncanny realization that he might be outmatched. Crank groaned on the pavement, cursing. Spider lay stunned. Torque put his hands up, palms outward. Easy there. We didn't mean no real trouble. Rachel advanced a half-step, her voice cool as the water she had drunk moments ago. Too late for that. The older man took another cautious step backward, chin raised. We'll get out of your way. I swear, this was just a misunderstanding. But from behind him, a dusty black SUV screeched into the gas station lot. Another group of bikers, 3 more men wearing the Desert Wolves patch, poured out, alerted by the scuffle. Tires spat gravel, the engine revving aggressively. Torque's face twisted into a grin of relief. Reinforcements had arrived. Rachel's eyes tracked the new threat. One of them brandished a sawed-off shotgun, another carried a crowbar, and the third had brass knuckles. They advanced swiftly, fury etched across their faces upon seeing Crank and Spider sprawled on the ground. Oh, you messed with the wrong crew, the man with the shotgun growled, leveling it in Rachel's direction. The tension was nuclear. For a fraction of a second, Rachel's mind calculated the angles. The gas pumps were behind her, the store entrance a few yards to the left. Several bystanders watched, frozen, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. A high-pitched hum seemed to fill her ears and her muscles coiled like springs. She had faced firearms more times than she could count. But here, in this moment, the advantage was not on her side. She had to time everything precisely. Torque's grin told her he believed her luck had run out. And for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty coursed through her. She had a sidearm concealed beneath her jacket, but drawing on a loaded shotgun at close range was akin to playing Russian roulette with 4 bullets in the chamber. Crank, still on the ground but more alert now, rasped out a command, blow her away. Teach her to mess with the wolves. Rachel's shoulders tensed. The desert sun felt 100 times hotter. The mother and 2 kids inside the store stared in horror. The teenage cashier was shouting into the phone, presumably giving police a frantic play-by-play. The man with the shotgun took another step closer, finger already tightening on the trigger. Rachel considered making a dash behind the pump station, but the spread of a shotgun blast at this range would be deadly. She'd have to be far faster than she had any right to be. Her mind raced, scanning for an opening, any opening. Before she could act, the staccato wail of police sirens cut through the desert air. For a moment, nobody moved. Dust swirled across the gas station lot, and the heavy rumble of approaching engines followed the sirens. The arrival of law enforcement introduced a new variable, potentially giving Rachel the upper hand, or so she thought. But she didn't know the depth of the corruption lurking in the Shadow Creek Police Department. She didn't know that Captain Davis and his deputies had their own arrangement with the Desert Wolves. And she certainly didn't anticipate that her fight against a few bikers at a shabby gas station would soon unravel a $100 million drug operation toppling a corrupt network that spanned international borders. Red and blue lights splashed across the dusty parking lot as 3 Shadow Creek police cruisers surrounded Johnson's gas station. Rachel stood by her bike, fists still clenched. The breeze carried the smell of spent adrenaline, a mix of sweat, rubber, and fear. The man with the shotgun lowered his weapon slightly, eyeing the cruiser doors as they flew open. Out stepped Captain Davis, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in Shadow Creek. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a thick mustache and a crisp uniform. Even under the midday sun, Davis's uniform looked freshly pressed. Beside him, two deputies, Jenkins and Ortiz, each wore stern expressions. As they fanned out across the lot, Rachel remained where she was, arms slowly lowering to her sides but still coiled for another strike if needed. Torque gestured at Rachel, speaking rapidly. The psycho jumped Crank and Spider. Nearly killed M. Crank moaned, rubbing his temple, and Spider spat blood onto the pavement. Rachel kept her gaze forward, not saying a word, waiting to see how the police would handle the situation. She noticed the fleeting look that passed between Torque and Captain Davis. It was subtle, but a practiced observer like Rachel registered it immediately. Her instincts told her something was off. Davis approached Rachel. "Ma'am, put your hands where we can see them." She raised her hands calmly, watching the tension in the officer's posture. Would they be so quick to draw down on her if they didn't have some prearranged deal with the bikers? The question lingered like a stale odor. Rachel was used to law enforcement either asking questions first or at least maintaining an air of impartiality. But Davis's glare showed clear hostility toward her. Deputy Jenkins, a stocky man with an aggressive jawline, moved to Crank and Spider, barking at them to stay put. While Jenkins checked their injuries, Deputy Ortiz sidled up to the man holding the shotgun. She didn't demand he drop it, which was suspicious enough. Instead, she merely motioned for him to keep it pointed at the ground. "Start talking," Davis said to Rachel. "What happened here?" Rachel never believed in lying to the police. She had dedicated her life to defending Americans. She wasn't about to hide behind falsehoods, but she wasn't about to incriminate herself either. They confronted me inside the store, followed me out, threatened me. It escalated. Jenkins snorted from the side. "You escalated it by beating M nearly senseless?" Rachel shot him a cold glance. "They drew weapons first." "That's a damned lie." Crank wheezed. "She attacked me out of nowhere. She's some kind of martial arts freak. She's crazy." Captain Davis shifted his gaze between them. "Can anyone corroborate her story?" Inside the store, the mother and two kids were pressed against the glass, fear etched on their faces. The teenage cashier stood behind the register, phone still in hand. Rachel made a slight motion with her head, indicating the bystanders might have witnessed the entire event. But Davis only frowned deeper, as if unconvinced. Torque added, "I'm telling you, Davis, we were just a skin about her bike. Next thing you know, she's going off on Crank and Spider. Come on, man, we got no reason to lie to you." The moment he called Davis man instead of captain, Rachel's suspicions crystallized. No typical citizen would address the head of local law enforcement so casually unless they shared a deeper rapport. Her stomach nodded, anticipating that this wasn't a standard police stop. Davis took a step forward, nearly nose to nose with Rachel. "You got a permit to carry that firearm under your jacket?" He jerked his chin at the slight bulge in the zipper area. Rachel's voice was cool. "I'm a retired Navy SEAL and have a legal concealed carry permit recognized by the state of Arizona." Deputy Ortiz's eyebrows flickered. "Navy SEAL?" There was doubt in her voice. Everyone knew the teams were male-only for decades until changes allowed certain exceptional women to enter special operations roles. But Rachel was indeed one of those few, a pioneer recognized mostly behind closed Pentagon doors. "Check her ID," Davis ordered. She obliged, retrieving her wallet with slow, deliberate movements. Jenkins snatched the ID and radioed dispatch. The wait for confirmation was a charged silence, broken only by the labored breathing of Crank and the faint rumble of highway traffic. Finally, Jenkins frowned at the confirmation in his earpiece, then looked back at Davis. "ID checks out. She's Captain Rachel Morrison, U.S. Navy, retired." Captain Davis's expression hardened further, as though he had expected to uncover an imposter. But the facts were the facts. "So you're some kind of badass, huh?" he asked Rachel, contempt dripping from his tone. Rachel didn't rise to his provocation. She held her silence, remembering an old SEAL credo, the quiet professional fights only when necessary. Still, she assessed her odds if this turned nasty. They were not in her favor, not with so many cops who appeared friendly to the bikers. A black SUV roared into the lot. This one bore the Shadow Creek police emblem on its side, marking it as an unmarked detective vehicle. The driver's door opened, revealing an imposing man in plainclothes. He looked older than Davis, with graying hair and a deeply lined face. Rachel noted the diamond ring on his finger and a watch that likely cost more than a police salary. He carried himself with a confidence that said he was used to being in control. "Captain, fill me in." His voice boomed across the lot. Davis gestured in frustration. "Detective Hightower, we got ourselves an assault situation. 3 bikers claim she attacked them. She claims they threatened her." Hightower's eyes flicked briefly to Torque. Another loaded glance, another silent message exchanged. He focused on Rachel. "Is that true? You attacked these men?" Rachel gave a curt nod. "In self-defense." Hightower sighed, feigning weariness. "Look, we can sort this out at the station. Ma'am, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to come with us." Torque grinned. Spider and Crank exchanged victorious looks. Rachel saw the trap forming like storm clouds on the horizon. If she went in with them, she'd be at their mercy behind closed doors, no doubt set up to take the fall. With no lawyer at her side and no official mission protecting her, Rachel was alone in a corrupt town. But she also knew resisting arrest outright would escalate the situation beyond control. She needed a plan. The real question was, how deep did the corruption go? Judging by the Desert Wolf's smug confidence, it probably ran through the entire local law enforcement chain of command. Rachel unclenched her fists. "All right, I'll come in peacefully. But only if you let the witnesses from inside the store give their statements. Let them come down to the station and be heard." She gestured toward the mother and her kids along with the teenage cashier. Captain Davis hesitated for a heartbeat, then scowled, turning to Deputy Jenkins. "Get statements, then have them sign. Bring them to the station." The teenage cashier, freed from his daze, ducked back behind the counter to scribble details onto an incident form. The mother hesitated, biting her lip, worried glances flitting from the bikers to the cops. Finally, she nodded her agreement to make a statement. "Well then," Hightower said, his tone officious, "you'll ride with me, Ms. Morrison. We'll sort this all out downtown." As Rachel walked toward Hightower's SUV, she felt the Desert Wolf's predatory stares burning into her back. She'd embarrassed them and they weren't going to forget it. Torque's smirk spoke volumes. This was only the beginning. Within minutes, Rachel found herself in the passenger seat of Hightower's unmarked SUV, heading down Highway 87 toward the Shadow Creek Police Department. She watched the desert roll by, her own bike left behind at the gas station, presumably to be towed. She had no illusions that her rightful property would be handled with care or that her side of the story would see proper justice. The road stretched out ahead, a lonely ribbon weaving through rocky terrain and scrub brush. Hightower kept his eyes on the horizon, steering with one hand. Silence suffused the vehicle. Rachel took this lull to study him. He had a slight scar near his left eye, the kind that might come from a close call in a brawl or a bullet graze. His cologne was overpowering, a harsh, musky scent. In the center console, an expensive cell phone blinked with repeated messages. "You really a SEAL?" Hightower asked abruptly, his tone laced with skepticism. Rachel let a cold smile touch her lips. "I was. Still am, in spirit." He grunted. "Fancy. So you've killed people overseas?" "I've served my country in a variety of operations." Her non-answer only irritated him further. He turned his gaze briefly from the road to look at her. "Why are you really here, Ms. Morrison? Shadow Creek ain't exactly a tourist hotspot." She kept her expression neutral. "Personal reasons. I'm on a cross-country ride." "Cross-country ride. That right?" She nodded, refusing to elaborate. One thing Rachel had learned was never to give away more than necessary. For now, it was enough that they believed she was just passing through. She had no desire to mention that she'd come to Arizona to meet an old SEAL buddy in Phoenix for a quiet get-together. The more these crooked cops knew, the more leverage they might glean. They pulled into Shadow Creek's main strip, a place that could hardly be called bustling, lined with a handful of shops, a post office, and a bank. The police station was a small rectangular building with barred windows reminiscent of an old frontier sheriff's office. The sign out front read, "Shadow Creek Police Department, Serving and Protecting." Hightower parked in a reserved spot. He got out first, motioning for Rachel to follow. Her eyes swept across the building, noting the one-story layout, the barred windows, the single security camera above the entrance, just enough to check off official requirements without providing real coverage. As soon as they entered, Rachel felt the oppressive weight of hostility. The few civilians inside, presumably there for minor issues or complaints, watched with curiosity as Hightower guided her toward a side corridor. Cops at their desks paused mid-conversation to cast suspicious glances her way. "Fingerprint her," Hightower barked at a clerk behind a counter. "We'll book her for assault. Let's see what the DA says." The clerk, a young man who looked fresh out of the academy, stepped forward uneasily. "Sir, but if the victim—" "Just do it," Hightower snapped. Rachel rested her palms on the counter to be fingerprinted. The clerk rolled her fingers one by one, then pressed them onto a digital scanner. Rachel's mind raced with possibilities. If she was officially booked, it could create a bureaucratic mess that might trap her in Shadow Creek for a good while. She needed to think ahead. Her background was squeaky clean in terms of civilian convictions, but all it would take was a cooperative judge and a crooked DA to keep her locked up. After the print scan, Hightower led her down a dingy hallway toward a small interrogation room. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. He opened the door, gesturing for her to enter. The room was stark, a metal table, 2 chairs, a mirror that was obviously two-way glass. The air conditioning hummed loudly, making it feel like a meat locker compared to the desert outside. "Sit," he said. Rachel complied, her face impassive. She had gone through SEER, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training. This was amateur hour by comparison. But she couldn't underestimate them. Corruption made people dangerous in unpredictable ways. Hightower slammed the door behind him. Through the glass, Rachel sensed at least one observer on the other side. Perhaps Davis or another detective. The only saving grace was that too many witnesses at the gas station had seen the bikers start trouble. Hightower couldn't fully bury her case without risking some level of public scrutiny. But in a town where the local powers aligned with outlaws, justice was a scarce commodity. She steeled herself for a battle of wills. Part of her mind flashed back to her time in uniform, to the countless missions where friend and foe weren't always obvious. Shadow Creek was becoming another war zone, albeit in slow motion. She felt no fear, only a controlled readiness. If they wanted a fight, she would give them one on her terms. A sharp rap on the door heralded the entrance of Captain Davis. He frowned, glancing at Rachel before taking a seat opposite her. He set a manila folder on the table and flipped it open with studied slowness. "Captain Rachel Morrison," he began, reading from the folder as though it contained her entire life story. "Age 38, distinguished service, multiple commendations, some of these are redacted." "Interesting." He closed the folder. "You must think you're special." Rachel didn't bite. She said nothing, letting the silence speak for her. Davis continued, "Word has it you assaulted 3 men without provocation. Now, I can keep you locked up here for quite a while, pending an investigation. Or you can tell me what you're really doing in my town." She leaned forward, voice low but steady. "I told you. I'm passing through. On a cross-country ride." Davis's lip curled. "Bull. Nobody just passes through Shadow Creek unless they're lost or they got business. You from the feds?" She raised an eyebrow. "If I were from the feds, do you think I'd use my real name?" That gave him pause. After a moment, he exhaled, crossing his arms. "Maybe. Or maybe you're not as clever as you think." Another silence blanketed the room. The hum of the air conditioner felt oppressive. Rachel studied Davis's face, the faint lines of stress, the hardened jaw of a man who commanded fear in a small town. She suspected he'd done things that weighed on him, or maybe he enjoyed the hold he had over others. The question was, how far would he go to maintain that power? Suddenly, the door opened. Detective Hightower stuck his head in, gesturing for Davis to step outside. Davis gave Rachel a last glare, then left the room, shutting the door behind him. Rachel took a slow breath, easing tension from her shoulders. She needed to find a way out of this. When Davis and Hightower returned 10 minutes later, their expressions told her something had shifted. Davis cleared his throat. "We have conflicting witness statements. Some say the bikers threatened you, some say it was mutual. We can't hold you indefinitely, but you'll remain in town until the DA decides how to proceed. We'll keep your weapon in evidence and your bike in the impound lot." Rachel's jaw tensed. "I haven't been charged. You can't seize my property without due process." Davis smirked. "We can do a lot of things around here, Morrison. Consider it an impound fee, courtesy of the Desert Wolves." Oh, and for your own safety, of course. Hightower leaned in, voice low. It'd be a real shame if you tried to leave. We wouldn't want you skipping out on an ongoing investigation. Rachel glared. I'm not skipping out on anything, but I'm not paying you crooks a dime. Davis shrugged. Then you can stay in a cell until your case is processed. They had her cornered. She could fight them physically, but that would only worsen her legal situation. And she suspected Davis would love an excuse to keep her locked up. So she inhaled, let her anger settle, and reminded herself that a patient approach might serve her better. All right, she said. Where do I stay in the meantime? Hightower and Davis exchanged a look. Finally, Davis muttered, We've got a single motel in town. The Desert Star. Not fancy, but it's a roof. Don't try anything stupid. We'll drive you, Hightower added. Then you wait there until we call you in. Understood. Rachel gave a nod of reluctant acceptance. At least out of the station, she'd have more freedom to plan her next move. She stood up, every muscle tense, and let them guide her out. As they walked through the station's main area, an uneasy hush followed. Rachel felt eyes on her, the scrutiny of a small-town police force twisted by corruption. The sunshine outside was blinding after the station's dim interior. Hightower led her to a spare squad car, this time indicating she ride in the back. She slid onto the uncomfortable vinyl seat, the door slamming shut behind her. Within minutes, they headed down the main street again, passing a diner, a feed store, and a pawn shop. They turned onto a cracked side road, leading to a squat, L-shaped building with a flickering neon sign, Desert Star Motel. The structure looked dated, paint peeling under the onslaught of the sun. A single palm tree drooped near the sign, a half-hearted attempt at landscaping. Hightower killed the engine. End of the line, Ms. Morrison. Check in. Wait by the phone. You'll be hearing from us. Rachel pushed the door open, stepping into the scorching desert heat. She turned back to the detective. You'll call when you want me. But after that, I want my property returned. Understand? Hightower gave a mirthless grin. Sure thing. We'll be in touch. He peeled out, leaving a swirl of dust in the parking lot. Rachel surveyed her new accommodations with a grimace. The Desert Star certainly wasn't the Ritz, but she didn't exactly have a choice. She headed inside, where a lone desk clerk, an older woman with silver hair piled high on her head, studied her through thick glasses. The clerk arched an eyebrow. Help you? I need a room, Rachel said. The clerk glanced past Rachel's shoulder to see the retreating squad car. A flicker of pity crossed her features. They told me to expect you. Room 8's open. $40 a night, plus tax. You pay up front. Rachel kept her tone civil even though frustration knotted her insides. Fine. She paid cash, received a key with a plastic tag reading 8, and headed outside to find her room. The desert sun hammered down, turning the pavement into a heat trap. Room 8 was at the far end of the lot, next to a sputtering ice machine that sounded like it was on its last breath. She unlocked the door to discover a cramped space with a stained carpet, a battered dresser, and an ancient TV. At least the air conditioner worked, rattling and wheezing but spewing lukewarm air into the stale atmosphere. She dropped onto the bed, the thin comforter crackling under her weight. A single overhead light cast a yellowish glow that did little to lift the room's gloom. Rachel stared at the water-stained ceiling, her mind churning. She thought about calling her old SEAL buddy in Phoenix, but she had no phone. Her cell phone was in her bike's saddlebag, now impounded. The desk phone on the nightstand was her only means of communication, and she doubted it could even call out of state without an operator's permission. Trapped. This wasn't the first time she had felt caged, but it was the first time she'd felt so at a disadvantage on her own soil. Still, panic wasn't an option. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. She needed to gather intelligence, figure out who was friend and who was foe in this dusty town, and plan her next step meticulously. Late afternoon light spilled through the blinds, casting horizontal shadows across the room. She rose from the bed, pacing, every sense on alert. If the desert wolves found out where she was staying, she'd be easy prey. But then again, if they wanted her dead, they would have tried at the gas station. This was different. She sensed they wanted to break her or exploit her somehow. Maybe both. She thought of the bystanders in that gas station, especially the mother and kids who had witnessed the assault. They must have told the truth in their statements. But how far would their testimony go in a corrupt system? And who else might know the real story? A single plan began to form in her mind, find out more about the Desert Wolves, their connections, and Captain Davis's role. If she could gather enough evidence of corruption, she might turn the tables, possibly even contact federal authorities from outside the county. But for now, she was cut off. Rachel checked the motel phone. Dial tone, at least. She picked it up, trying a number she remembered from memory, the direct line of her old friend Tom Grayson, a retired FBI agent who worked as a private investigator in Denver. To her dismay, it rang but never connected to an outside line. A mechanical voice declared she needed the operator to place a long-distance call. She cursed softly and replaced the receiver. One thing was certain, the next move belonged to the Desert Wolves or the police. Rachel decided she'd be ready. Nightfall rolled in quickly in the Arizona desert, bringing a slight reprieve from the heat. She flicked on the grimy lamp by the bed. Her reflection in the small mirror above the dresser showed tired eyes and hair matted from sweat and dust. She spotted a bruise forming on her forearm from the earlier brawl, nothing serious, but a reminder of the day's events. She was just about to lie down when a soft knock sounded at the door. Every nerve stood on end. She approached cautiously, heart-thudding. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Who is it?" she called, pressing her back against the wall beside the door. "Ma'am, it's me, Ortiz." "Deputy Ortiz." Rachel frowned. She silently pulled the curtains aside just enough to see a slim figure in a police uniform. Deputy Ortiz was indeed standing there, her face grim. Seeing no immediate threat, Rachel opened the door a crack. "Yes." Ortiz looked uneasy, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid of being watched. "I need to talk to you privately." Rachel stepped aside to let her enter. Once in the room, Ortiz exhaled shakily, then brushed a hand through her short-cropped hair. Her eyes didn't hold the same malice as Davis or Hightower. Instead, they showed fear. "I'm not supposed to be here. If they catch me," she trailed off, swallowing hard. "I was at the gas station today. I saw what really happened. Those bikers were the aggressors. You had every right to defend yourself." Rachel studied her, searching for hidden motives. "Then why are you here now? Why not speak up at the station?" Ortiz's face twisted with shame. "You don't understand how things work in Shadow Creek. Davis and Hightower are in bed with the Desert Wolves. A lot of money changes hands. People who stand up to them, they either disappear or end up in prison on false charges." Rachel nodded slowly. It confirmed her suspicions. "And you don't want to be a part of it anymore?" Ortiz nodded, her voice trembling. "I've been trying to find a way to get out. But if I do, they'll come after me. They'll come after my family." Her voice cracked, and she composed herself. "When I saw them bring you in, I realized you're not just some random traveler. If you're really ex-SEAL, maybe you can do something about this." A slight glimmer of hope surfaced in Rachel. "An ally. Potentially. So why trust me?" Ortiz's eyes were wet with unshed tears. "Because you stood up to them. Nobody else has. And I heard you mention your rank. I know enough to realize you're not someone who backs down." Rachel shut the door quietly, pressing her back against it. "What can you tell me?" Ortiz took a deep breath, then spoke in a low voice. "The Desert Wolves run a major drug operation through Shadow Creek. Meth, heroin, fentanyl, whatever the cartel sends them, they distribute up the pipeline to bigger cities. Davis gets a cut for protection, turning a blind eye to shipments. Sometimes he helps them root around DA stings. Hightower is worse. He's rumored to be the one who orchestrates hits on anyone who threatens the operation. We're talking about hundreds of millions in product moving through every year." A chill slid down Rachel's spine. This was bigger than she'd expected. "So the entire department is compromised?" Ortiz shrugged helplessly. "Not everyone, but the honest ones are scared or clueless. Davis has enough power to make a scapegoat out of anyone. And the local judge? She's rumored to be on their payroll too." Rachel's thoughts spun. Exposing such a well-entrenched operation would require more than mere courage. It would need a plan, evidence, and backup. "I'll need proof," she said finally. "Hard evidence that can't be dismissed or buried." Ortiz nodded. "I can help you get it. But you have to protect me. They'll kill me if they find out." Rachel placed a hand on the deputy's shoulder. "I promise I won't let that happen." The gravity of her promise sank in. She was effectively taking on a drug ring, a gang of violent bikers, and a corrupt police force, armed with little more than her training and a shaky alliance with one frightened deputy. She remembered standing at the gas station that morning, thinking she was just making a quick pit stop on her way to meet an old friend. Instead, she had stepped onto a battlefield with no exit in sight. Ortiz pulled a small flash drive from her uniform pocket. "This is a start. It's a copy of some finances, routes, and coded messages I found on the department's server, things I was able to sneak off. It's not the full picture, but it's incriminating enough to show a pattern." Rachel took the drive, carefully placing it in the interior pocket of her jacket. "All right, let me handle this carefully." Ortiz stepped away, her posture rigid with anxiety. "I have to go. If I'm gone too long, they'll suspect something. Just don't trust anyone and don't underestimate them. The wolves will come after you and they won't play fair." Before Rachel could respond, Ortiz cracked the door open, scanned the parking lot, and slipped out into the night. Rachel quietly shut the door behind her, making sure to deadbolt it. She turned back to the dingy motel room, exhaling shakily. In her hand, the flash drive felt like a ticking bomb. She needed a laptop or at least some way to see what was on it. Tomorrow, she'd see if there was a local library or an internet cafe. For now, she was stuck in a rundown motel without her bike, armed only with her wits and a vow to protect a terrified deputy. The desert wind outside sighed against the windows as though the whole land was whispering a warning. "Tread carefully. Danger awaits at every turn." She settled into bed, listening to the distant roar of motorcycles echo across the highway. Sleep would come fitfully, if at all. But she had no choice. The war had begun, and there was no going back. Morning light seeped through the frayed curtains of room 8 at the Desert Star Motel. Rachel awoke with a start, the phone's insistent ringing piercing her dreamless half-sleep. She lunged for the receiver, adrenaline spiking. "Morrison," she answered, voice still thick from sleep. A distorted male voice came through, sounding vaguely familiar. "Captain Davis wants you at the station." He said no delays. Click. The line went dead. Rachel sighed, sitting up on the edge of the bed. She rolled her shoulders, wincing at the ache from yesterday's altercation. Her reflection in the mirror revealed dark circles under her eyes, courtesy of a night spent tossing and turning. She checked the clock radio on the nightstand, 8:15 a.m. She had no idea what to expect at the station. Another interrogation? Or had they decided to formally charge her? She hoped at least Ortiz would be around to offer some buffer or a heads-up. Grabbing her jacket, she made sure the flash drive was still secure in the inner pocket. It was. She then made her way outside into the already blistering morning heat. The motel parking lot was nearly empty except for 2 dusty sedans. One had seen better days, missing hubcaps, dents in the hood. The other was relatively clean. The faint hum of cicadas accompanied her walk to the motel office. Inside, the clerk from the previous night was behind the desk, sipping coffee and reading a paperback novel. "Good morning," the woman said, barely looking up. Rachel rested her hands on the counter. "Is there a bus or taxi service in town?" The woman let out a short laugh. "Honey, we barely have a grocery store. Closest taxi is over in Payson, and I doubt they'd make the trip just to haul you around. You could ask Carl if he's doing rides today." "Carl?" The clerk leaned in conspiratorially. "He's the town's unofficial shuttle. Sometimes folks pay him a few bucks for a lift if he's not too drunk. He's usually parked by the diner, sipping coffee in the morning." Rachel thanked her and exited. She paused in the shade of the motel's overhang, scanning the dusty street. Spotting the diner wasn't hard. It was a stone's throw from the motel, a low-slung building with a faded, open 24/7 sign. She walked over, each step raising small puffs of dust from the sun-baked ground. The diner's interior was cooler, the AC blasting. The smell of bacon, coffee, and stale grease enveloped her. She saw only a few patrons, an elderly couple sharing a plate of pancakes and a man in a baseball cap hunched at the counter, a half-empty coffee mug in front of him. A battered pickup was parked outside, the possible shuttle. Rachel slid onto a stool next to him. "Carl?" she asked softly. He turned, watery blue eyes peering out from under the cap. "That's me," he rasped. "I heard you might give me a ride to the police station." He eyed her skeptically. "Gonna cost you." "How much?" He shrugged. $10 round trip." She nodded. "Deal." He downed the last of his coffee, left a few bills on the counter, and motioned for her to follow. His pickup was a vintage Ford, paint chipped and rusted in places. The inside smelled faintly of pipe tobacco. As they pulled onto the main street, he cast a sideways glance at her. "You that lady who got in trouble with the wolves, right?" Rachel offered a tight smile. "Word travels fast. Ain't much else to talk about around here." He paused as though weighing whether to continue. "Watch yourself with them. They ain't just some weekend club. They got real connections." "I've noticed," Rachel said simply. Carl said nothing else for the short drive, though she caught him stealing a few more curious glances. The station came into view, the same squat building with barred windows that had greeted her the day before. He pulled up to the curb, engine idling. "Want me to wait?" Carl asked. "Yes, please," Rachel replied, digging out a $10 bill. "I'll pay extra if I'm in there a while." He nodded, pocketing the money. "All right, I'll be here." Rachel stepped out and entered the station. Unlike yesterday, the lobby had a handful of citizens waiting, an older man disputing a parking ticket, a young woman visibly upset, possibly reporting a domestic issue. Rachel approached the front desk. A plump receptionist with a tight perm and thick eyeliner glanced up. "I'm here to see Captain Davis," Rachel said. "Are you Ms. Morrison?" the receptionist asked, tapping a long acrylic nail against a phone list. Rachel nodded. "He's expecting you. Go right in." She pushed a button, unlocking the door leading into the back offices. Rachel walked down the hall to Davis's office, passing desks where uniformed officers typed reports or chatted on phones. Some gave her cold stares, others looked away as if acknowledging her presence might bring them trouble. She wondered how many of them were on the Desert Wolves' payroll. Davis's office door was ajar. She peered in to find him at his desk, flipping through a file. Without looking up, he gestured for her to enter. She stepped inside, shutting the door behind her. The cramped space smelled faintly of stale coffee, sweat, and something chemical, gun oil, maybe, or the cleaning supplies used to mask evidence of wrongdoing. "Sit," Davis said, pointing to a chair in front of his desk. She did so, folding her arms. Davis had his uniform shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a sweaty undershirt. He looked exhausted and annoyed. "We've reviewed witness statements from the gas station. The mother claims you were acting in self-defense, the cashier supports it. But some other statements align with the biker's story, saying you instigated." Rachel cocked an eyebrow. "That's a lie." He shrugged. "Maybe, but the DA's on the fence. Your record is squeaky clean, which helps you, but you're also a trained combatant, which might argue against you. Means you're lethal, and maybe you used excessive force on these poor fellas." A flush of anger touched Rachel's cheeks. "Poor fellas? They threatened me with a gun." Davis raised a hand. "Don't get riled up. I'm just telling you how it could be painted. Right now, you're out on a sort of verbal bail. You try leaving town, we'll have grounds to arrest you. That means no crossing the county line, got it?" Rachel's jaw clenched. "You can't hold me here without pressing charges." He leveled a cold stare. "I can do whatever I want in my town, Ms. Morrison. Don't test me." He flipped the file shut and leaned back in his chair. "So far, the Desert Wolves have decided not to pursue charges for assault. But if you keep stirring trouble, they might change their minds. Understand?" She said nothing, maintaining a stoic mask while her mind raced. This was a shakedown, pure and simple. They wanted her under their thumb, docile and harmless. The question was, why not just frame her and lock her away? Davis continued, "You lay low, mind your business, and we'll see if we can't bury this. If not, well, I can't promise the next outcome will be so kind." He tapped a pen against the edge of his desk, a clear sign of impatience. "That's all for now. You can see yourself out." Rachel stood, biting back a retort. She turned to leave, opening the door. Hightower was in the hall, leaning against the wall with arms crossed. He gave her a mocking half-smile. She brushed past him without a word, but as she exited, she felt his gaze drilling into her back. "Ms. Morrison," he called after her in a casual tone, just a friendly reminder to stay out of trouble. She ignored him, continuing down the hall, anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. Clearly, the plan was to bully her into submission, maybe hoping she'd ride out of town so they could say she fled. But she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. If anything, she'd push back harder. In the lobby, she paused only to see if Deputy Ortiz was anywhere in sight. She wasn't. Worry niggled at Rachel's mind. Ortiz might be lying low after last night's clandestine visit, or maybe she'd been discovered. She hoped not. Carl's pickup was still idling at the curb as promised. She climbed in, noticing the sweat staining the man's shirt collar. Didn't take long, he remarked. No, Rachel said curtly. She handed him a few more bills. Mind driving me around the town? I want to see what's here. He shrugged. Your dime. Where to first? She considered her options. She needed to figure out how to access the info on the flash drive. The local library was her best bet for a public computer. The library, she said. If it exists. Carl chuckled. We got one. It's small. They drove past the minimalistic downtown, which consisted of a handful of shops, a diner, a bar, and a used car lot. The library was a modest, single-story building with a sign reading Shadow Creek Public Library, looking as though it was built decades ago and rarely updated. Rachel stepped out, telling Carl she'd be a moment. Inside, she was greeted by the musty scent of old books and outdated carpeting. A single librarian, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun, looked up from behind a desk. May I help you? She asked softly, as if not wanting to disturb the hush of the library. I need a computer, Rachel said. The woman pointed to a row of 4 aging desktops near the back. Sign in, please. There's a 30-minute time limit if someone else needs it. Rachel thanked her, scrawled a fake name on the sign-in sheet, and found the last computer in the row. The ancient machine whirred noisily as she woke it from sleep mode. She inserted the flash drive in a USB port. A single folder opened on the screen, labeled SC_police. Inside were dozens of files, spreadsheets, text documents, images. She scanned them, heart pounding at what she saw, logs of shipments marked with code names, payments in large sums, references to routes that included Narrows Pass and Lightning Ridge. She clicked on another file, a text document with partial phone transcripts, conversations about drop-off points, and political cooperation fees. Davis's name appeared multiple times along with an alias TH that she suspected referred to Detective Hightower. It was indeed incriminating. Possibly enough to send them all to prison if it was genuine and not a hoax. Her pulse hammered. This was explosive evidence. Enough to topple the entire operation, provided she could get it into the hands of someone trustworthy. But who? The local FBI branch might be compromised if the corruption spread further. She needed a direct line to a high-level contact. If only she had her phone, or if she could place a call from a secure line. She copied all the files onto the desktop, then created a password-protected zip file, just in case. The antiquated library system tested her patience. It was slow, the connection precarious. She quickly realized the computer was so locked down with filters she couldn't install or run additional software. Emailing the info to her FBI contact friend, Tom Grayson, proved difficult as well. The library's firewall blocked personal email attachments beyond a certain size. Time ticked by. A teenage boy walked past, glancing at her screen. Rachel minimized the windows. After he left, she reopened the folder. She managed to compress the files to a smaller size, then tried to attach them to a simple webmail account she set up on the spot. The progress bar inched forward painfully. Come on, she muttered under her breath, tapping the desk impatiently. At 85% upload, a system error popped up, attachment blocked. She gritted her teeth. Another attempt yielded the same result. She looked around. If the library's firewall was this restrictive, she might never get the files out. A new plan formed in her head. She'd physically mail the flash drive to Tom. But that posed its own risks, as the local post office might easily be monitored. She cursed under her breath, logging out. She ejected the flash drive and slipped it back into her pocket. She'd find another way. Perhaps she could get out of town quietly, reach a bigger city, and contact authorities from there. But with Davis's warning, leaving the county might get her arrested or worse. Outside, she found Carl dozing in the driver's seat. She tapped the window gently. He woke with a snort, rolling it down. Find what you were looking for? Not exactly, Rachel said. She climbed in. Take me back to the motel. He pulled out, driving down the near-empty road. You don't look too happy. Rachel gazed out at the dusty storefronts. I'm not. Carl didn't pry further. She let her mind churn over the possibilities. She needed to plan carefully. Could she sneak out at night on foot, retrieve her bike from the impound, and ride until she reached safety? The wolves would probably guard the impound. Then there was the matter of Ortiz, who was risking her life to help. She'd already set the wheels of rebellion in motion. If Rachel fled, the deputy would face retribution alone. That left only one logical path: she had to fight this from within. She had to systematically dismantle the Desert Wolves operation and the corrupt cops who enabled it. Carl dropped her at the motel. She paid him, adding a little tip for his trouble. "If I need a ride again, is it all right if I call the diner?" He nodded. "Sure. They always know where I'm at." Rachel gave him a small, grateful smile, then stepped out of the truck, bracing herself against the furnace-like air. Her eyes wandered across the parking lot to a battered blue sedan parked a few spaces away. Something about it made her gut tighten. It had tinted windows too dark for legal limits, and the driver's seat window was cracked open just enough to let someone peer out. She pretended not to notice, heading into the motel's front office first. She approached the clerk, speaking quietly. "Hey, did you rent that blue sedan to anyone recently?" The clerk glanced out the window, frowning. "Not that I recall. It's been there a while, but nobody came in." Rachel's pulse quickened. "A tail?" She forced a casual shrug. "Thanks. Mind if I check out the vending machine?" The clerk gave her a puzzled smile. "Suit yourself." Exiting through a side door, Rachel rounded the corner of the building, pressing herself against the rough stucco wall. The sun baked her from above, but she steeled her nerves, inching forward until she could peer around the corner. She had a clear line of sight to the sedan's passenger side now. There was definitely someone inside, the shape of a head partially visible behind the tinted glass. As if feeling her stare, the figure shifted. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, tall, lanky, wearing jeans and a sleeveless leather vest with the Desert Wolves patch. He scanned the area, hand near his waistband. A holstered weapon, no doubt. Rachel's heart rate increased. She wasn't armed and she didn't need a second run-in with the wolves. But maybe she could glean information. Crouching low, she moved quietly along the motel's perimeter. The man had his back turned, fiddling with something in the front seat. She could see a patch on his vest that read Ridge, likely his road name. He pressed a phone to his ear, speaking softly, though she couldn't catch the words. The moment he hung up, he spotted Carl's truck leaving the lot. Ridge stepped toward the front office, as if considering going in, then changed his mind. Instead, he got back into the sedan and reversed onto the street, disappearing in a cloud of dust. Rachel exhaled, tension coursing through her. They were watching her. Davis's warning had manifested into active surveillance. She needed to stay one step ahead. Entering her motel room, Rachel double-checked the door locks. She flicked on the AC, pulled out the flash drive, and laid it on the small table. It felt heavier now, loaded with the weight of an entire criminal enterprise. She paced back and forth, formulating a strategy. Step 1. Confirm the physical location of the bikes, their hideout, or any distribution points. Step 2. Gather photographic or video evidence to back up Ortiz's data. Step 3. Find a secure line to contact a high-level federal agent or a trusted ally. Easier said than done in a small, isolated town brimming with watchers. But she thrived on impossible missions. Years in special operations taught her that unwavering determination often trumped daunting odds. A knock on her door tore her from her thoughts. Her muscles tensed, adrenaline spiking. Another knock, more insistent. She approached, pressing her ear to the thin wood. "Rachel?" A whisper came from the other side. "It's Ortiz." She quickly undid the lock and let the deputy Indiana. Ortiz stepped inside, face pale, eyes anxious. "What's wrong?" Rachel asked, scanning the deputy's trembling posture. Ortiz swallowed. "They suspect me. Hightower's been asking questions about my whereabouts last night. And earlier today he caught me at my desk with finance files open. I think he knows I took them." Rachel steadied Ortiz's shoulders. "It's going to be fine. We'll take them down before they can do anything to you." Ortiz gave a shaky laugh. "You don't know them. They're ruthless. Davis might play the calm sheriff, but Hightower is the one who does the dirty work. And the wolves," her voice broke. "They kill without hesitation." Rachel met her eyes. "We have to move faster. We need more evidence, and we need a way to get it out of this town." Ortiz nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I might have a lead. I overheard them talking about a big shipment coming through Narrows Pass in 2 days. They're planning something major, maybe a huge drop or handoff. If we could record the transaction, show the wolves moving drugs under police escort, that would be undeniable proof." A plan snapped into focus in Rachel's mind like the final piece of a puzzle sliding into place. That might be our shot. But we have to be careful. If we go up there and blow our cover, they'll kill us both. Ortiz exhaled, face set with grim resolve. It's our best chance. Rachel nodded. We'll prepare. I have some surveillance training we can use. We'll gather the gear we need, record everything, then send it to someone in the federal government who can bypass local corruption. Ortiz's lips trembled into a half-smile, relief mingled with fear. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Rachel managed a reassuring nod, though inside she was already anticipating the logistical nightmare. They needed cameras, a vantage point at Narrows Pass, and an escape route just in case. And they needed to time it perfectly so they caught the transfer on camera without being spotted. Outside, the day wore on, the desert heat intensifying. The stage was set for a confrontation that would decide the fate of Shadow Creek, or at least the shattered illusions of its peaceful facade. One thing was certain, Rachel Morrison, the wrong woman to mock at a gas station, was about to bring the fight right back to the desert wolves and expose the rotten core of a criminal empire festering in the Arizona sun. 2 hours later, Deputy Ortiz guided her patrol vehicle down a narrow dirt track off the main road, far from prying eyes. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, scanning the horizon. Sharp cliffs rose on the left, while a flat expanse of desert stretched on the right, dotted with cacti. Ortiz had suggested this remote area for a clandestine strategy session, somewhere even the wolves wouldn't bother patrolling on a scorching afternoon. They came to a stop near a rocky outcropping. The engine ticked as it cooled under the blazing sun. Ortiz hopped out first, glancing around nervously. Rachel followed, stepping onto the parched ground. A vulture circled overhead, a silent sentinel of the desert's cruelty. We shouldn't be disturbed here, Ortiz said, her voice almost lost in the expanse. Rachel nodded, scanning the terrain. We need a vantage point. The pass is about 6 miles north, right? Ortiz pulled out a laminated map from her patrol car. She unfolded it on the hood, pointing to a narrow mountain pass meandering through rocky hills. Narrows Pass. It's not used often by tourists because the road's in bad shape. Perfect for illicit handoffs. Rachel traced the route with her finger. They'll likely meet somewhere just beyond the apex where the pass opens out. Maybe near these rock formations. She tapped a spot labeled Devil's Thumb. Ortiz nodded. Yes. There's cover there, plus multiple exit routes. And it's not visible from the main road. They bent over the map, plotting possible positions. Rachel recalled her training, analyzing lines of sight, approach angles, and egress paths. We'll need high ground. Maybe here. She pointed to a ridge south of Devil's Thumb. With binoculars and a decent camera, we could catch the exchange. Ortiz's brow creased. We only have the department's dash cams and some handhelds. But if I take them without permission, it might raise suspicion. Rachel stroked her chin. What about personal electronics? A smartphone with a decent zoom or a personal camcorder? Ortiz grimaced. I have a phone, but it's not top-notch. Most folks in Shadow Creek aren't exactly flush with high-tech gear. Rachel took a moment to think. We'll need something decent or the footage might be too grainy. We can't risk them claiming it's fake. She paused. There might be a pawn shop in town that sells electronics. Ortiz brightened. Yes, Paul's Pawn. He has a variety of used stuff cameras, maybe a small drone if we're lucky. The idea of a drone piqued Rachel's interest, but she worried about noise. A drone could get us closer footage, but it's risky. They might hear it. Let's first see what's available. Ortiz nodded. And after we get the footage, then what? Rachel folded the map. We get out of Shadow Creek, or at least transmit it to someone who can act on it fast. We can't rely on local agencies, they're compromised. We need to reach a federal level or a state-level official not on the take. If I can contact my friend Tom Grayson in Denver, he can forward it to his old colleagues at the FBI. They'll know how to handle it. The plan sounded bold, and it was. But they had little choice. Ortiz crumpled under a fresh wave of anxiety, burying her face in her hands for a moment. I'm sorry. I never thought, Rachel placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Don't apologize. You're risking everything to do the right thing. That takes courage. Ortiz blinked back tears, nodding. After a moment, she composed herself. Okay, let's do it. They climbed back into the patrol car, the engine kicking up dust as they returned to Shadow Creek. The drive was tense. Every passing vehicle felt like a potential threat. The radio crackled with routine calls, disturbances, traffic stops, but neither of them spoke, lost in thoughts of the imminent confrontation. They arrived at Paul's Pond, a squat building with barred windows and a garish neon sign that flickered open. The parking lot was cracked and empty. Ortiz parked around the corner, not wanting to draw attention with a marked patrol car. "Let's go," Rachel said, stepping out into the oppressive heat. They entered the shop to the jingle of a bell. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over rows of glass counters displaying an assortment of second-hand items, watches, jewelry, knives, vintage electronics. At the back, a wall of guitars and tools. The smell was a mix of musty rugs and cheap cologne. A rotund man with thinning hair, presumably Paul, stood behind the counter. "Welcome to Paul's Pond," he drawled, wiping sweat from his brow. "What can I do for you ladies?" Ortiz stepped forward, her deputy's badge glinting on her belt. "Hi, Paul. We're looking for a good camera. Something with a solid zoom, decent resolution." Paul eyed them with open curiosity. "Department filming a PSA or something?" Ortiz forced a small laugh. "You know how it is. Gotta record some training exercises for the county. Our usual gear is on loan, so we need to improvise." Rachel tensed. She hated lying, but necessity demanded it. "We'd also be interested in a small spotting scope or binoculars if you have any," she added. Paul shrugged. "Got a few in the back. Let me see what I can dig up." He disappeared through a curtain into a storage area. Rachel scanned the shop. No other customers were around. A single ceiling fan turned lazily overhead, doing little to alleviate the stifling air. "Here we go," Paul announced, returning with a slightly battered camcorder and a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars. "This cam's a few years old, but it's got a decent optical zoom. Battery still holds a charge. Binoculars are in good shape too." Rachel tested the camera, peering through the viewfinder at a poster on the wall. Zoom was surprisingly good. She pressed the record button and indicator light glowed red. She nodded to Ortiz. "This should work." Ortiz asked, "How much?" Paul licked his lips, appraising them. $120 for the camcorder, $70 for the binoculars. Ortiz sighed. "That's kinda steep, Paul." He shrugged. "Pawn business ain't exactly boomin'. I gotta make a livin', . Rachel intervened, pulling out some of the cash she had left after paying for her motel stay. She quickly realized she was low on funds. Between fueling up her bike before it was impounded and the motel, she didn't have much on her. "We have about 150 total. That'll have to do." Paul grimaced but relented. "Fine. Deal. But don't tell nobody I gave a discount." They paid him. As he was bagging their purchase, Paul paused, curiosity flickering again. "Y'all ain't really filming a training exercise, are you?" Ortiz's face tightened. "Why would you say that?" He shrugged, leaning closer with a conspiratorial whisper. "Word around town is that the Desert Wolves are gunning for a certain newcomer. The same woman who put 2 of their boys in the hospital. Figured you might be buying gear for something else." Rachel's heart thudded. "We're just doing official business, Paul." He eyed them for a moment, then raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Ain't none of my concern. Just be careful out there. The wolves got eyes everywhere." They left the shop, the bag clutched tightly in Ortiz's hand. Rachel scanned the street, no sign of suspicious vehicles. Still, paranoia surged. She and Ortiz rushed to the patrol car, anxious to leave. Once inside, Ortiz let out a shaky breath. "I can't wait for this to be over," she admitted. "I hate lying to people." Rachel understood the sentiment all too well. Sometimes it's necessary to do the right thing. They drove back to the police station, ironically, because Ortiz had a shift to finish. She parked in the rear lot out of sight from the main entrance. Before stepping out, she handed the bag to Rachel. "Keep the safe. I'll text you if I hear anything else about the Wolves or Davis's plans." Rachel nodded, taking the bag. "Stay alert. Don't let them corner you." Ortiz forced a smile. "I'll do my best." She stepped out, adjusting her uniform and taking a moment to compose herself. Then she walked toward the station's rear door with a forced casual stride. Rachel watched her go, a pang of worry twisting in her gut. If the Wolves or Hightower suspected Ortiz was feeding information to Rachel, her life would be in immediate danger. Rachel left the station lot on foot, conscious that people might find it odd to see her walking around town. But the less time she spent near that building, the better. She cut through a dusty alley behind the local hardware store, hoping to avoid detection. The late afternoon sun bore down on her relentlessly. A block from the motel, she spotted something that made her heart skip. The same tinted window sedan from earlier was parked across the street, partially hidden behind a battered billboard. She kept her eyes forward, resisting the urge to stare. Her footsteps quickened as she approached the motel's back entrance. The tension in her gut coiled like a spring. She needed to stash the camera and binoculars somewhere safe. If the wolves broke into her room while she was out, they might destroy or steal the evidence-gathering equipment. She considered her options. She could hide it outside, but then the desert elements or a random vagrant might damage or steal it. Inside her room, she searched for a hiding place. The nightstand drawer? Too obvious. Under the mattress? Typical. The ceiling tiles? The motel's ceiling was plaster, so no luck. Finally, she settled on removing the back panel of the rickety dresser, taping the camera and binoculars inside, then replacing the panel. It wouldn't fool a thorough search, but it might survive a quick rummage. She pulled out her multi-tool, one of the few items the cops hadn't confiscated, and unscrewed the panel. She carefully wrapped the devices in a spare t-shirt, secured them in place, and screwed the panel back on. She stood back, examining her work. It looked like a battered dresser. Nothing more. Now came the waiting game. The meet at Narrows Pass was 2 days away. Rachel's mission was clear: gather intelligence on the scheduled time, position herself in a vantage point, capture video evidence, and find a way to transmit it. In the meantime, she had to lay low and try not to provoke the wolves or the crooked cops. Her hunger gnawed at her. She realized she hadn't eaten anything since morning. The diner was the only real option within walking distance. The thought of going back there, possibly exposing herself to watchers, made her uneasy. But she needed sustenance. She also needed to appear normal, as if she weren't planning a covert operation to dismantle an entire drug ring. Decision made, she cleaned herself up in the tiny bathroom, fixing her hair to appear less disheveled. She slipped on a clean t-shirt and stepped out, strolling toward the diner in the waning desert light. Downtown Shadow Creek was subdued in the late afternoon, the dying sunlight casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. A few locals nodded at her in passing, some offering polite hellos, others staring as though they recognized her from rumors. She forced an air of calm, every step purposeful yet unhurried. At the diner, the hush of the AC washed over her again. She took a seat in a corner booth away from windows. The menu was the same simple affair: burgers, sandwiches, a few salads. She ordered a burger and iced tea from the waitress, who regarded her with open curiosity. "You that Navy lady?" she finally asked, voice low. Rachel took a measured sip of water. "Just passing through." The waitress nodded but didn't press. She disappeared behind the counter, leaving Rachel with her thoughts. The background music was an old country tune crackling from a jukebox. A few tables over, an elderly rancher nursed a cup of coffee. Rachel's phone confiscated. Her bank cards locked away in the station evidence bin. She had to live off the cash in her jacket, and there wasn't much left. The challenge of infiltration and exposure typically required resources she now lacked. But she'd adapt as always. Her burger arrived, and she bit into it hungrily. It was surprisingly decent, the tang of pickle cutting through the char of the meat. Halfway through, she sensed a movement at the diner entrance. She glanced up, heart stuttering. Spider, the wiry desert wolf she had taken down at the gas station, stepped inside, arms covered in fresh bruises. He sported a bandage on his forehead and a mean scowl. He spotted her immediately. Rather than charge over, though, he slunk to a booth near the door, eyes narrowed. He was alone, but that hardly meant he was harmless. Rachel continued eating, forcing herself to look unfazed. She didn't acknowledge him, hoping he might leave if she gave no reaction. Instead, he flagged down the waitress and ordered something. Over the next few minutes, Rachel could feel his gaze searing into her. Finally, she finished her meal, paid cash, and stood to leave. As she passed Spider's table, he muttered, "We ain't done, you and me." She paused, half-turned. The tension in the air was palpable, the waitress eyeing them nervously. "Do yourself a favor," Rachel said softly, "walk away." Spider's lip curled in a sneer. "We'll see who walks away next time." Rachel said nothing more, stepping out into the orange glow of the setting sun. She scanned the street, no tinted sedan now, but maybe they changed cars. She quickened her pace, the hairs on the back of her neck prickling. At every turn, the desert wolves lurked. Back in room 8, she locked the door and turned on the lamp. She examined the flash drive again, wondering if it was wise to keep it with her. Ultimately, she decided it was safer in her personal possession than in a flimsy motel drawer. She found a small slot in the heel of her riding boot, a place where she'd sometimes stash emergency items. She slid the flash drive inside, patting it with a piece of cloth to prevent rattling. Night fell fully, the desert sky a tapestry of stars. Rachel stood by the window looking out at the twinkling lights of a few distant houses. A group of bikers roared past on the highway, engines echoing across the stillness. She closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing. With each inhale, she imagined forging a plan. With each exhale, letting go of any doubt that might hamper her. Sleep claimed her late that night, restless and fractured. She dreamed of past missions, the swirl of night vision goggles and the crack of distant gunfire. She saw faces of teammates lost, remembered the dusty roads of Afghanistan. Then, in her dream, the enemy was the desert wolves. She saw their snarling patches, heard the roar of their bikes. She snapped awake before dawn, drenched in sweat. Clenching her jaw, she forced her heart rate to slow. She had faced worse odds in foreign lands with the entire weight of the U.S. Navy behind her. Now she was alone, or nearly so, inside a nest of vipers. Yet determination flowed through her veins. The wolves had chosen the wrong woman to harass at that gas station. The consequences of their arrogance were unfolding, and she would see this mission through to the end, even if it meant waging a personal war in the scorching Arizona desert. A new day was about to break, and Rachel Morrison braced herself for the escalating conflict that loomed just beyond the horizon. What follows is the full continuation, ensuring well beyond 10,000 words in total, revealing every twist, every betrayal, and every hard-fought triumph in the saga of how 3 bikers at a gas station triggered a chain of events that would topple a multi-million-dollar drug operation and change Shadow Creek, Arizona, forever. Dawn arrived with a muted pink glow creeping over the horizon. Rachel had barely slept. She folded the scratchy motel blanket and rose, wincing at the stiffness in her neck. Today, she had to prepare for tomorrow's infiltration at Narrows Pass. That gave her one day to finalize her plan with Ortiz, scope out vantage points, and possibly gather more intel. The sense of ticking time was palpable. First, she pulled the dresser out slightly, unscrewed the back panel, and retrieved the binoculars. She wanted to see how well they performed in actual desert conditions. After wrapping them in a towel, she slipped out of the motel room and set out on foot, carefully checking if the tinted sedan or another suspicious vehicle lurked nearby. No sign of watchers. The early light was still gentle, the desert air not yet scorching. She headed out of town, hugging the side roads, stopping every so often to glance back for tails. By the time she'd reached the outskirts, the sun began to intensify. She climbed a gentle slope, scanning the landscape with her binoculars. The quality impressed her for a second-hand set. She could clearly see shapes a few miles away, perfect for the Narrows Pass operation. Her vantage point also provided a sweeping view of Shadow Creek. The place looked almost serene in the morning light, small houses, a single church steeple, dusty roads lined with battered vehicles. It was hard to reconcile this sleepy image with the reality of a violent gang controlling the entire underworld of the town. But that was often how corruption thrived, quietly, behind closed doors, until someone tore the doors off their hinges. As she lowered the binoculars, her heart jumped at the sight of a black SUV on a dirt path not far from her. A police SUV. Through the glare, she recognized the shape of a single occupant. Possibly Hightower. She ducked behind a rock formation, watching as it crawled along the rugged trail. Was he searching for her, or just patrolling? Her mind kicked into high gear. She couldn't afford to be spotted. She crouched, edging around the rocks to keep out of sight. After a tense few minutes, the SUV rumbled off, heading in the opposite direction. She exhaled in relief. Returning to town took another half hour. She was drenched in sweat and needed to remain inconspicuous. Any sighting of her skulking in the desert could raise suspicion. She passed a few locals tending to their yards, mostly older folks who gave her curious glances but nothing more. At the motel, she moved quickly, stashing the binoculars back in her improvised hiding spot. Then she ducked into the bathroom, splashing water on her face, trying to cool down. The faucet rattled, the pipes groaning as if protesting the water usage. When she emerged, she found the phone in her room ringing again. Tensing, she snatched it up. "Hello?" A familiar voice, Deputy Ortiz. "Rachel, they're sending me on a call outside of town. Some supposed domestic issue at a ranch off Route 14. But I think it's a setup." Rachel's stomach twisted. "Why do you say that?" Ortiz's voice dropped. "Hightower insisted I go alone. It's too suspicious. I don't know if I should refuse. Refusing could raise suspicion if she had no legitimate reason." "Okay. Where exactly is the ranch?" Ortiz provided an address. "I need backup, but I don't trust any of the other deputies. I'm worried I'll be ambushed." Rachel scanned the meager items in her motel room. She had no official badge, no weapon. Still, she wouldn't let Ortiz go into a potential trap alone. "All right, I'll follow discreetly. Text me the exact route you're taking." Ortiz breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you. I'm leaving the station in 10 minutes." They hung up. Rachel wasted no time. The biggest problem, she had no vehicle. Carl might still be around, but calling him would take time. She peeked out the window, scanning for alternative transportation. Luck flickered in the form of an old bicycle leaning against the motel wall, presumably belonging to the maintenance man. It wasn't locked. Rachel felt a pang of guilt but decided necessity overrode niceties. She grabbed the bike, hopped on, and pedaled hard through the side streets. The dusty wind whipped her hair as she headed for the police station, hoping to catch Ortiz's patrol car before it sped off. Her muscles burned from the effort, but she pressed on. Near the station, she slowed, careful to keep her distance. Sure enough, Ortiz's patrol car was just pulling out, heading toward Route 14. Rachel fell in behind, keeping at least 2 blocks between them. It was far from an ideal pursuit method. Any passing glance might spot a solitary woman on a bike in the middle of the desert. But traffic was minimal, so she managed to stay out of direct sight for the first mile. Outside town, the paved road gave way to a rougher surface. The patrol car accelerated. Rachel cursed under her breath, pedaling furiously. Sweat trickled down her temples. She had to be creative. On the right, she spotted a scraggly row of mesquite trees flanking a parallel dirt track. Veering off, she followed the track, pushing the bike through sandy patches, occasionally losing sight of Ortiz's cruiser but generally aware of its location by the dust cloud it raised. Minutes dragged on like hours in the sweltering heat. Her legs screamed for reprieve, but she refused to slow. The desert opened onto a ranch property enclosed by a barbed wire fence. She saw the patrol car turn in at a long driveway marked by a rusted mailbox. Rachel skidded to a stop behind a patch of shrubbery, breathing hard. She chained the bike to the scrub brush, an admittedly half-baked measure, but she didn't want it easily stolen or tampered with. Crouching low, she surveyed the ranch. A dilapidated farmhouse stood near the driveway, partially hidden behind an overgrown orchard of pecan trees. No sign of movement except for Ortiz's car parked out front. Alarm bells rang in Rachel's head. Where were the ranch owners? Where was the so-called domestic dispute? She dashed along the fence line, creeping closer. A single crow perched on the fence post, cawing ominously. In a perfect world, she'd have a sidearm, but Shadow Creek's finest had relieved her of that. She'd have to rely on hand-to-hand skills if things went south. Peering through the orchard, she spotted Ortiz stepping onto the porch, calling out Shadow Creek police. "Anyone home?" A mild breeze carried her voice across the silent yard. Then the door opened and a figure emerged, a tall man in a cowboy hat, brandishing a shotgun. Rachel's pulse spiked. The man barked something at Ortiz, who raised her hands, trying to defuse the situation. Then, from behind the farmhouse, another figure appeared, this one wearing a leather Desert Wolves vest. The trap was confirmed. Without hesitation, Rachel scaled the barbed wire fence, ignoring the barb that snagged her wrist. A trickle of blood slid down her arm, but adrenaline blocked the pain. She darted from tree to tree, advancing steadily. The man in the vest circled around, likely to flank Ortiz. The rancher with the shotgun advanced too, forcing the deputy backward off the porch. Ortiz's voice carried a tremor. "Hey, put that down, we can talk." A chilling laugh. "Shut up, pig. You ain't got no friends out here." Rachel kept going, hard hammering. They hadn't seen her yet. Her advantage was the element of surprise. She needed to time this perfectly. If the rancher fired that shotgun at close range, Ortiz was done. The orchard ended about 20 yards from the house. She'd have to cross open ground. Swallowing a breath, she burst from cover. The man in the vest spotted her, eyes widening. "Who the hell?" he shouted. The rancher started to pivot, but too late. Rachel slammed into him, grabbing the shotgun's barrel and yanking it aside. A thunderous blast erupted, sending a cloud of dust and bird shot harmlessly into the ground. Ortiz seized the distraction, ducking behind the patrol car door. The man in the vest lunged at Rachel, swinging a crowbar she hadn't noticed. She barely dodged, feeling the wind of its arc across her cheek. Pivoting, she kicked his knee, buckling it. He stumbled with a yowl of pain, dropping the crowbar. She snatched it before it hit the dirt. The rancher recovered, trying to swing the shotgun around. Rachel jammed the crowbar into his gut, doubling him over. The man in the vest reached behind his waistband, likely for a pistol. Ortiz popped up, handgun drawn, and shouted, "Freeze." Her voice cracked with authority, if somewhat shaky. For a moment, all three froze. The desert wind whipped dust across the yard. The rancher clutched his ribs, the shotgun now lying on the ground. The vest-wearing biker glared hatefully, but he stopped his reach for the pistol. Ortiz advanced, gun leveled. "Hands in the air," she barked. They raised their hands slowly, the biker scowling at Rachel. Blood trickled from his lip. The rancher spat at the dirt. Ortiz cuffed them, working quickly, her chest heaving with adrenaline. Rachel took a cautious step back, crowbar still in hand. The immediate threat was contained, but she expected reinforcements any second. Who had orchestrated this, and were more wolves on the way? Ortiz frisked them, retrieving a revolver from the biker's belt. She glared at him. "You set me up." "Why?" He sneered, not responding. The rancher cursed under his breath, wincing from his bruised ribs. Rachel stepped in. "Who sent you?" The rancher barked a laugh. "You're in over your head. Davis, Hightower, hell, the whole damn town's in on it. You think you'll get away with assaulting us, deputy? They'll bury you." Ortiz pressed her lips together, refusing to be intimidated. She grabbed the rancher's phone from his pocket, handing it to Rachel. "Search it." Rachel quickly scrolled through recent messages. Sure enough, a text thread with "Th likely Hightower" read, "Wait for Ortiz. Will arrive soon." The timestamp was mere minutes ago. She glanced around, searching the horizon. If Hightower was en route, they had precious little time to vanish. Rachel grabbed Ortiz's arm. "We need to get out of here before more show up. Cuff them to the porch or something. We can't drag them back without facing a bigger ambush." Ortiz swallowed hard, nodding. She marched the two men over to a heavy metal railing on the porch, using a second set of handcuffs to secure them. The rancher let out a string of curses while the biker spat threats. With them restrained, Ortiz and Rachel rushed to the patrol car. Rachel hopped in the passenger seat, heart pounding. She slammed the door as Ortiz gunned the engine, spinning the wheels in the dirt. They roared down the driveway, dust cloud billowing behind them. Soon, they hit the main road, scanning the horizon for sign of Hightower. Just as they reached a junction, Rachel spotted a black SUV in the distance, closing fast. "There," she shouted. "We have to lose them." Ortiz took a hard turn onto a side track, the car jolting violently over uneven ground. The rear tires fishtailed. The SUV behind them picked up speed, kicking up its own dust storm. The chase was on. With little choice, Ortiz steered deeper into the arid wilderness, weaving around rocky outcrops. The patrol car's suspension groaned in protest. Rachel clung to the dash, scanning for any possible cover or alternate route. The black SUV gained steadily, a menacing silhouette in the mirror. "Damn it," Ortiz hissed. "We can't outrun them on this terrain." Rachel's mind raced. They're anticipating a confrontation on the road. "Let's break line of sight. Head for that canyon to the left." She pointed to a narrow gap in the cliffs. Ortiz jerked the wheel. The car careened onto a rocky path that dipped into a dry wash. The going was rough, each bump rattling them. The canyon walls loomed, pressing inward as they advanced. Rachel glanced back. The SUV slowed at the canyon's entrance, uncertain or cautious. Dust hung in the air, obscuring vision. Ortiz kept driving deeper. Finally, when they were certain they were out of sight, she killed the engine. Heart hammering, both women sat in tense silence, listening for the rumble of the pursuing vehicle. The midday sun was merciless, heating the car's interior to an oven-like temperature. Neither dared open the doors for fear of noise. Minutes ticked by. The only sound was the distant caw of birds and the soft ping of the cooling engine. Eventually Rachel exhaled. They might be waiting for us to come back out. Ortiz nodded, face slick with sweat. We can't stay here forever. But maybe we can sneak out on foot, circle around. Rachel considered that. They'll likely watch your patrol car if they find it. But we have no choice. Let's ditch the car and proceed on foot. Ortiz reached under her seat, retrieving a small duffel bag. I have a canteen and a first aid kit. Not much else. She paused, glancing at Rachel apologetically. No extra weapons besides my service sidearm. That's fine. Let's move. They slid out quietly, cringing at the squeak of the doors. The canyon floor was sandy, lined with boulders. A gentle breeze ruffled the sparse desert brush. Keeping low, they walked deeper into the canyon, searching for a path that would lead them to higher ground. Rachel felt the weight of the day's events pressing on her. This was an escalation she hadn't planned on. The wolves and Hightower were making bold moves. If not for her timely intervention, Ortiz might be dead. Now, they were both fugitives in a sense, pinned down in hostile territory. In the hush of the canyon, the magnitude of the situation settled in. A single misstep could mean capture or death. And if that happened, the evidence on Ortiz's flash drive, the entire reason for this risky mission, would be lost. Yet ironically, Rachel couldn't help but feel a surge of grim determination. These men had shown their hand. They wanted Ortiz out of the picture. They wanted Rachel either dead or neutralized. So be it. She had no illusions about the brutality awaiting them if caught. They pressed on until the canyon opened into a narrow defile where a trickle of water from an underground spring moistened the rocks. A few patches of green clung to life here, cacti and hardy shrubs. Rachel paused, scanning the walls for climbable ledges. We can scale that, she pointed to a sloping rock face that led to a higher vantage. Ortiz wiped sweat from her brow. Lead the way. Hand over hand, they ascended. The rock was rough, scraping their palms. At times, Rachel had to leverage her upper body strength to haul them up. Ortiz managed, though her uniform was ill-suited for such climbing. Eventually, they reached a small plateau overlooking the desert. From here, they could see for miles in all directions. Sinking to the ground, they caught their breath. Rachel pulled out the canteen, taking a measured sip before passing it to Ortiz. The deputy drank gratefully. I can't believe this is happening, she murmured. Rachel gazed out at the baking desert. Far off, she spotted a dark speck that might have been the black SUV creeping along a distant road. It's happening because they're scared. We have the power to take them down. Ortiz hung her head, arms trembling. What now? We can't go back to town with them gunning for us. Rachel weighed the options. We have to stick to our plan for tomorrow. The Narrows Pass meeting. That's our chance to catch them red-handed. Once we get that footage, we'll find a way out of the county. Maybe we can contact someone from the outside. Ortiz's eyes were red-rimmed, her nerves frayed. But she nodded slowly. It's all we've got. They decided to wait until dusk when the cover of darkness would make movement safer. The day stretched in searing monotony. They alternated short rests, scanning with binoculars, observing the terrain for any sign of approach. The black SUV did pass by once, a distant shimmer of metal and dust, but it didn't spot them high on the ridge. As the sun sank low, turning the sky into a palette of oranges and purples, they prepared to leave. Climbing down was tricky in the fading light, but they managed, gripping the rock faces carefully. The desert floor below was cooler now, shadows stretching. Heading back to the patrol car was risky, so they decided to circle wide around the canyon and approach the outskirts of Shadow Creek from another direction. It was a long, grueling hike over rugged ground. The dryness in the air sucked moisture from their pores and their canteen ran dangerously low. By the time the lights of the town flickered in the distance, they were both exhausted. They found themselves on the southwestern edge of Shadow Creek, near an abandoned trailer park dotted with rusting RVs. Ortiz paused, leaning against a chain-link fence. We need to separate, she panted. If they see us together, it'll be suspicious. Rachel agreed. I'll head to the motel, gather our gear for tomorrow. You stay somewhere safe. Don't go home, they might be waiting for you. Ortiz bit her lip. There's an old friend who owes me a favor. I'll lay low at her place." They shared a tense look. No words were needed to acknowledge the danger. Finally, Ortiz gripped Rachel's hand. "Thank you. I mean it. I'd be dead if not for you." Rachel managed a faint smile. "We're in this together now." With that, they parted ways, each disappearing into the hush of the desert night. Once Rachel was certain Ortiz was safe, she slunk through the back streets, instincts honed from countless nights of stealth operations overseas. Every dog's bark made her freeze, every flicker of a porch light set her nerves on edge. But she reached the Desert Star Motel without incident. Inside her room, she locked the door and slumped against it, heart hammering. She checked the dresser, hiding spot, camera, and binoculars still there. Relief washed over her. She took a moment to wash the dust and dried blood from her scraped wrist, her mind replaying the day's harrowing events. Tomorrow was the big day. The confrontation at Narrows Pass would either expose the entire criminal network or seal their fate. Rachel stared at the battered camcorder, then at the reflection of her bruised face in the mirror. She had been in tough spots before, but never so alone, never with so little backup. Yet her resolve was unwavering. She'd survive and she'd see justice done. She turned off the lamp, letting the darkness envelop the room. Outside, a lone coyote howled at the moon, its eerie cry echoing across the desert plain. She closed her eyes, quietly centering herself for the battle ahead. Dawn of the second day came like a messenger of fate. Rachel woke before sunrise, the motel room sweltering despite the weak air conditioning. She swallowed a lump of apprehension. By nightfall, everything could change. She would either have the evidence to take down the desert wolves or risk a violent end in the desert. Her first task, confirming the time of the meet. Ortiz's tip suggested it would happen at sundown, but these things could shift. The deputy had promised to text any updates, but Rachel's phone was in police custody. She bristled at the memory of Davis smugly locking away her belongings. She needed another method of contact. Grabbing the crowbar from the orchard fiasco wasn't an option. She'd left it at the ranch. She had only her wits, her battered boots, and the camera gear. A half-baked idea occurred. Maybe Carl could help again. He had a phone in his truck, presumably, but relying on him too often risked dragging him into danger. Nevertheless, Rachel left her room, scanning the motel lot for watchers. None apparent, though she trusted that about as far as she could throw it. She slipped around to the diner, crossing the street under the brightening sky. Inside, she found Carl perched at the counter, nursing his usual coffee. He glanced up, eyes widening. Heard there was some commotion out near Old Man Riley's ranch. People say a deputy got in trouble. Rachel gave him a thin smile. "I might know something about that." He shook his head. "Town's going to hell in a handbasket." She slid onto the stool beside him. "Carl, I need your help again. It's urgent." His gaze flicked around warily. "Listen, I don't want no trouble with the wolves or the cops." "I understand." She sighed. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Could you give me a lift to Narrows Pass this afternoon?" "I'll pay." He frowned into his coffee. "Narrows Pass, huh? That's Desert Wolves territory. You know that, right?" She nodded. "It's important, Carl. I'm trying to do something about them and I can't do it alone." He swallowed, fiddling with the handle of his mug. "Your funeral. But all right." Rachel felt relief, overshadowed by guilt. Carl was placing himself in danger just by associating with her. But she had no other viable transportation. "Thank you. I promise, once this is over, I'll make it right." He waved a dismissive hand. "Just keep me out of the crossfire. I'll drop you off and skedaddle." She nodded. "That's the plan." They parted ways with an agreement. Rachel would meet him behind the diner at 4 p.m. armed with her gear. In the meantime, she needed to finalize logistics with Ortiz. The problem, no phone, but maybe Ortiz would find a way to reach her. She decided to wait at the motel. Holed up in room 8, Rachel paced restlessly. The hours dragged, each minute stretching into an eternity. She reread the notes from the flash drive in her mind, recalling the shipments, code names, and payments. She tested the camcorder again, verifying the battery. It was half-charged. Good enough, though she wished she had a backup battery. Around noon, a light knock sounded at her door. She tensed, heart rate spiking. "Yes," she called softly. "Housekeeping," came a timid female voice. Rachel exhaled, shoulders sagging in relief. She cracked the door open to find a petite woman with cleaning supplies. "Do you need service?" Rachel shook her head. "I'm good. Thanks. The woman nodded, stepping away. Rachel watched her retreat, the tension in her gut coiling again. Everyone in this town could be a spy or informant. She shut the door, flipping the lock once more. Finally, the clock read 3:30 p.m. She hefted the camcorder bag, binoculars, and a small canteen of water, then slipped outside. The oppressive heat hammered her instantly. She moved swiftly, hugging the shade where possible, crossing the street to the diner's rear lot. Carl was already there, leaning against his pickup. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, throwing her gear into the truck bed and climbing into the passenger seat. The engine coughed to life, and they rumbled out of town. The glare from the sun was harsh, shimmering off the blacktop. Once they left the paved road, dust billowed behind them. After about 20 minutes, they turned onto a winding dirt trail leading into rugged hills. The rocky terrain grew more dramatic, towering formations of red stone looming. Narrows Pass was aptly named, a tight squeeze through the rocky outcrops that formed a natural choke point. Carl pulled over near a scrub brush. "This is as far as I go, lady. The pass is about a half-mile that way." He jerked his thumb at a faint path meandering through craggy slopes. Rachel hopped out, glancing at the route ahead. "Understood. I'll walk the rest." "Thank you, Carl. I appreciate everything." He gave her a wary glance. "You sure you want to do this?" She forced a small smile. "I have to." He nodded, eyes somber. "All right. You find me back at the diner if you make it out." Rachel nodded, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Carl reversed, spinning the truck around, heading back. She stood in the dusty road alone with the silent desert. Checking the time, 3:55 p.m. If Ortiz's intel was correct, the wolves would arrive near sunset, around 6 or 7. She'd set up early. She trudged up the trail, the sun scorching her neck. Occasional cacti and twisted Joshua trees offered meager shade. After 20 minutes, she spotted the vantage she'd eyed on the map, an outcropping above the pass. She climbed carefully, wincing at the rocky scrapes on her palms. Reaching the top, she found a shallow depression in the sandstone, enough to conceal her from casual observation below. She peered down through her binoculars, scanning the winding road. Perfect vantage. She set the camcorder in place, verifying the angle. A smaller path branched off the main pass, leading to a clearing near a massive boulder shaped like a Fong devil's thumb. She guessed that was the meeting spot. All that remained was to wait. Her throat parched, she sipped sparingly from the canteen. Time crawled under the punishing sun. At last, the sky began to shift colors, pale blue giving way to dusty gold, then streaks of purple near the horizon. The oppressive heat ebbed slightly, replaced by a thick hush broken only by the whisper of the wind. She steadied the camcorder on a flat rock, toggling it to record, zooming in on the pass. Nothing yet. Anxiety fluttered in her stomach. If Ortiz was compromised or delayed, Rachel might have to do this alone. She exhaled slowly, forcing composure. This was just another recon op, she told herself, albeit on home soil. At 6:40 p.m., engines growled in the distance. Through her binoculars, she spotted 4 motorcycles cresting the pass, accompanied by 2 SUVs. One of the SUVs bore the Shadow Creek police emblem. Her heart lurched at the sight. They slowed near Devil's Thumb, the bikes forming a semicircle. Out stepped Detective Hightower from the police SUV, gesturing to the second SUV behind them. Its windows were tinted black. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp white shirt emerged, accompanied by 2 henchmen. Cartel muscle, no doubt. Rachel hit record, heart hammering. She zoomed in, trying to capture their faces. One by one, men from the bikes and the second SUV gathered in the clearing, exchanging briefcases. She couldn't pick up the audio from this distance, but the body language spoke volumes, nervous tension, quick glances at each other. Then Hightower opened the trunk of the police SUV, revealing duffel bags. One of the bikers stepped forward, rummaged inside, nodding in approval. An illicit trade was happening right here, under the eyes of Shadow Creek's so-called law enforcement. Rachel's blood boiled. She zoomed closer, capturing a desert wolf's patch on one biker's vest. Crank, the brute from the gas station, was among them, a fresh bandage on his forehead. She recognized Spider, too, wearing a malicious grin. A few minutes passed as duffel bags were transferred. The tall cartel man handed Hightower a slim case, which the detective opened. Even at this distance, Rachel could see the gleam of stacked currency. She panned the camera slowly, ensuring she documented every step of this brazen conspiracy. Where was Ortiz? Rachel's eyes flicked to the past behind them. No sign of another patrol car. Worry gnawed at her. If Ortiz had been discovered, or if Davis had forced her to work a different shift, the deputy might be helpless. Rachel fought to keep her concentration on filming. If she missed a key moment, the evidence might be incomplete. Suddenly, the group's attention snapped toward the pass entrance. Rachel's heart leapt. Another patrol car crawled into view. It wasn't Ortiz, someone else in uniform. The driver got out waving. Hightower and Davis greeted him with nods. Davis spoke into a walkie-talkie, possibly confirming the route was secure. The man from the second SUV shot a glance up at the ridge, as if sensing watchers. Rachel ducked lower, heart pounding. She hoped the setting sun was behind her enough to obscure any reflection from the lens. The final handoff occurred. Hightower shook hands with the cartel representative. The Desert Wolves revved their engines, loaded with whatever contraband was in those duffels, likely drugs. The police presence ensured safe passage. Rachel kept filming, capturing the license plates of the vehicles. This was gold, incontrovertible proof. But the meeting wasn't over. Davis said something and Crank barked a laugh. The tall cartel man gestured to the trunk of his SUV. Another henchman opened it, revealing more duffel bags. This time, the content looked heavier, possibly firearms. Rachel zoomed in, seeing the gleam of metallic rifle barrels. A gun smuggling ring too? The magnitude of this was staggering. She kept rolling. Her muscles ached from crouching, sweat dripping into her eyes. The men wrapped up their exchange after about 15 more minutes. The bikes and the SUVs began to disperse, heading in various directions. She kept the camera trained until the last set of headlights vanished. Then she released the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Carefully, she reviewed the footage on the camcorder's tiny screen. The images were grainy but clear enough to identify faces, patches, guns, and the presence of the police. This would rock the foundation of Shadow Creek if it reached the right hands. Still no Ortiz. The pit in Rachel's stomach deepened. She decided to remain in place for another half hour in case the deputy arrived late or was searching for her. But as darkness fully settled, the pass lay empty. Reluctantly, Rachel packed up the gear. She couldn't risk traversing the rocky slopes in pitch black. With only the faint glow of moonlight, she began her descent. Halfway down, the scramble turned treacherous. Her foot slipped on loose scree, sending a small cascade of rocks tumbling. She grabbed onto a weathered tree root, heart hammering. The camera bag swung precariously. She clutched it to her chest, mindful that the evidence inside was priceless. She made it to the base of the ridge, panting, a fine layer of dust coating her. The night air was cooler, but tension soared higher than ever. She had the proof. Now she just needed to survive the next steps, finding Ortiz, securing a safe place to send the footage, and evading certain retaliation. Emerging onto the dirt road where Carl had dropped her off, she scanned the darkness. No sign of vehicles. The call of an owl echoed across the desert. She trudged forward, the only illumination a pale moon. Her sense of isolation was absolute. Then, a glimmer of headlights appeared in the distance. She froze, adrenaline surging. The vehicle was approaching slowly. She crouched behind a boulder, camera bag hugged to her side. The engine sound grew louder, the headlights cutting a swath through the gloom. As it neared, Rachel made out the shape, a beaten-up pickup. Carl's? Possibly. She emerged cautiously, ready to dive for cover if it wasn't him. The pickup halted, dust swirling in the headlights. The passenger door opened, revealing Carl's wiry frame. Rachel? That you? Relief flooded her. She stepped forward, raising a hand. Carl. Thank God. He waved her over. I got worried. Figured you might need a ride back. She climbed in, exhaling a shaky breath. I owe you big time. He grimaced. Town's crawling with cops and wolves. Something's up. You get what you needed. She patted the camcorder bag. Yes. He nodded, his weathered face reflecting concern. Hang on then. They rode back in tense silence. Rachel clutched the bag, her thoughts racing. She needed to find Ortiz or at least confirm she was safe. They approached Shadow Creek from a back road, avoiding the main highway. Carl navigated by the moonlight, headlights off to reduce visibility. At the motel, she thanked him profusely, then hopped out. He hesitated. You sure you'll be okay? She forced a brave smile. I'll manage. You get out of here before they spot you with me. He nodded, throwing the truck into reverse. She watched him vanish into the night, that gnawing guilt returning. Carl was putting himself at risk, yet he never once balked at helping her. Crossing the motel lot, Rachel spotted a figure leaning against the office wall, familiar silhouette wearing a deputy's uniform. Her heart soared for a moment, thinking it might be Ortiz. But as she drew closer, her stomach plummeted. It was Jenkins, the hostile deputy who'd threatened her at the station. He straightened at her approach, a hand drifting toward his sidearm. Out for a stroll? She mustered a casual tone. Evening walk. Is that a crime, deputy? He narrowed his eyes, stepping closer. Captain Davis wants to see you at the station now. Rachel's mind fired on all cylinders. They must suspect she had been at the pass. But she had no reason to comply with a midnight summons, especially if it was a trap. I'm tired. Tell him I'll be in tomorrow. Jenkins sneered. I'm not a skin dot. Rachel weighed her odds. She was unarmed. Jenkins had a gun. If she refused, he'd arrest her. He might try anyway, but she was reluctant to risk a lethal confrontation in the motel parking lot. All right, she conceded, let's go. He jerked his head toward a nearby squad car, the engine idling. She climbed into the back, dread pooling in her gut. Had they discovered Ortiz's betrayal? Or did they simply guess that Rachel had caught wind of the Narrows Pass deal? The ride was short, but each second felt like an eternity. They arrived at the station, Jenkins escorting her inside like a criminal. The building was mostly dark, only a few fluorescent lights humming. Hightower stood in the lobby, arms crossed, mouth twisted in a grim smile. Evening, Ms. Morrison, he drawled. Busy night? She remained silent, eyes flicking around. No sign of Davis. No sign of Ortiz either. Jenkins shoved her forward, and Hightower led the way down the corridor to an interrogation room. Flicking on the harsh overhead light, he motioned for her to enter. Once inside, Jenkins slammed the door shut, standing guard by it. Hightower paced slowly, like a panther circling prey. You know, he began, voice dangerously soft, we had reports of a suspicious figure around Narrows Pass tonight. Bikers said they saw movement on the ridge. Rachel forced a bored shrug. Could be anyone. Hightower's eyes narrowed. Could be. But I think it was you snooping around. She kept her poker face, though her pulse pounded. What exactly are you accusing me of? He chuckled darkly. Doesn't matter. We'll find out soon enough. Where's Deputy Ortiz? Rachel feigned confusion. How should I know? He backhanded her without warning. The blow sent her reeling, crashing into the metal table. Pain exploded across her cheek, and her vision blurred momentarily. Her entire body tensed, wanting to retaliate. But Jenkins had his hand on his holstered weapon, ready to shoot. She clenched her fists, focusing on controlling her anger. Where's Ortiz? Hightower repeated, voice razor-sharp. Rachel spat a bit of blood onto the floor, lifting her head defiantly. I have no idea. Another blow cracked across her jaw, this time from Jenkins. Stars danced before her eyes. She gasped, gripping the table's edge to stay upright. Hightower leaned in, breath sour with coffee. You're not leaving this room until you tell us what we want to know. Ortiz has gone AWOL. She's not answering her radio. We found her patrol car hidden in a canyon. So don't play dumb. Rachel steadied her breath, ignoring the throbbing in her face. Her mind whirled with possible gambits. She could feign ignorance or feed them misinformation. Yet she knew they might beat her senseless, or worse, if she didn't give them something. She told me she was quitting, Rachel lied, voice low. Said she was leaving town to get away from your corrupt department. Hightower snorted, unimpressed. Bull. She's up to something with you. We know you two have been in contact. He pulled out a worn phone from his pocket. Found this in the orchard near Riley's ranch after the incident. Text messages to Ortiz's phone, telling her to be careful, I'm on my way. Not your phone, but might belong to some friend of yours. Carl, maybe? Rachel clenched her jaw, refusing to speak. The truth was, she had no idea whose phone that was. It could be a red herring. But the mention of Carl set her teeth on edge. He'd be in danger if Hightower suspected him. Let's see, Hightower mused, scrolling through the phone. Lots of messages about meeting up in the desert, cover me at the orchard, all suspicious. Enough to bring charges against you for conspiracy if we want. He fixed her with a predatory stare. Unless you cooperate. He nodded to Jenkins, who stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Rachel's stomach churned, flashes of seer training returning, endure, resist, outlast. But the difference here was she had no cavalry. She was on her own in a locked room with two men who controlled the law in this twisted town. The next hours became a blur of pain. They didn't break bones or leave obvious marks that would be visible under clothing, but they targeted pressure points, landing short, brutal strikes to her abdomen, kidneys, ribs. She forced herself not to scream, not to give them the satisfaction. Her mind drifted to old training mantras: pain is temporary. Survival is everything. At some point, the overhead light flickered. The door opened, revealing Captain Davis. He frowned at the scene, Rachel slumped in a chair, lips split, face bruised, Jenkins breathing heavily, Hightower glaring with clenched fists. "That's enough," Davis barked. Hightower rounded on him. "She's not talking." Davis's eyes flicked to Rachel's battered form. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "We'll keep her locked up for the night. Maybe a cell will loosen her tongue. We can't risk leaving marks that'll raise questions." Relief, twisted though it was, washed over Rachel. At least the beating would stop for now. She let her head droop, silent tears mingling with sweat and blood. Jenkins yanked her up, half dragging her out of the room and down the hall. The station's few overhead lights offered a disorienting path. He shoved her into a small cell, slamming the barred door. With a final sneer, he hissed, "You're done, Morrison. Desert wolves run this town, and we run you." He stormed off, leaving her alone in the gloom. She sank to the floor, cradling her ribs. Every breath stabbed like a knife. She prayed Ortiz was out there, free and armed with the next step of their plan. If not, if Ortiz was captured or killed, all of Rachel's efforts would be for nothing. But she refused to give up. Closing her eyes, she envisioned the covert footage on the camcorder, safe in her motel room if no one had searched it yet. That evidence was her lifeline and possibly Shadow Creek's only chance at salvation. If she could endure whatever the wolves threw at her, if she could find a way out of this cage, she might still see justice served. She swore to herself, ignoring the taste of blood on her tongue. She hadn't survived years of brutal combat just to be broken by a pack of local thugs. As the night pressed on, every movement a symphony of agony, she clung to a single thought: morning would come, and with it, another chance to fight back. She had dozed for short bursts, leaning against the concrete wall, knees drawn to her chest. Sleep was sporadic. Each time she drifted, nightmares of captivity in foreign war zones jolted her awake. The cell floor was a slab of cold cement, and the single cot in the corner was stained and smelled of stale sweat. She tried to settle onto it, but every position sent shockwaves of pain through her torso. Now, in the faint morning light, she strained to hear any activity in the station. Footsteps echoed occasionally in the corridor beyond her locked door, but it seemed the overnight shift was minimal. Good. That might mean fewer obstacles if she found a way out. But how to escape? Without tools or a weapon, she had little chance of muscling her way through the station security. She remembered glimpses of a steel gate leading from the cell block to the main offices, plus a deputy's desk near that gate. They'd locked her up but not formally processed her in the system. It was more an off-the-books kidnapping. That fact cut two ways. There might be less red tape keeping her locked in, but no official paperwork also meant no one outside the station even knew she was here, and the crooked cops could disappear her if they wished. She pressed her palms against the raw scrapes on her knees. Stay calm. There's always a way. A scrape of boots on tile jerked her to attention. A moment later, someone tapped on the bars. She looked up to see a figure she recognized. Deputy Ortiz, hat pulled low, eyes flicking nervously down the hall. "Rachel," Ortiz whispered, voice tight. "God, they did a number on you." A flood of relief mingled with anger. "Ortiz, where the hell have you been?" Ortiz pushed her face between the bars, voice quivering. "I've been hiding out. I found out they were looking for me. I had to wait for a chance to slip in here." She held up a small key ring, her face grim. "I managed to steal the cell key from the evidence room. They stored it there after they locked you up without a formal booking." Rachel's battered heart pounded. "Then let's go quick." She heard distant chatter from deeper in the station. Ortiz fumbled with the key, curses under her breath. The lock finally clicked. Metal screeched as the door swung open. Rachel forced herself to stand, swallowing a groan of pain. Her entire torso felt like it had been used as a punching bag. Ortiz looped an arm under Rachel's shoulders, supporting her. "I'm sorry," the deputy whispered. I should have gotten here sooner. Rachel shook her head. Don't apologize. Just help me get out of here. Creeping into the corridor, they immediately faced a metal security gate. Ortiz gently tried the handle. Locked. She flicked through the keyring again, glancing over her shoulder with mounting panic. Rachel clenched her jaw against a wave of pain. Hurry. Finally, the second lock gave way. They slipped through, stepping into a dimly lit back hallway. The station was eerily quiet. A flickering fluorescent light overhead cast their shadows on the scuffed linoleum floor. Rachel's adrenaline surged. Every hair on her neck stood up. Any second, a deputy or detective could appear. They passed a row of half-open office doors. Through one, Rachel glimpsed a messy desk with a coffee mug reading, "World's Best Dad." Nothing about the station's mundane trappings hinted at the rot inside. With Ortiz's guidance, they reached a side exit leading to a small fenced parking area where police vehicles were kept. Ortiz paused at the door. Wait, we need to retrieve your phone, your weapon, everything they seized. It's in the evidence room 2 doors down. Rachel nodded. She knew how vital the gear was, not only for contacting help, but also to keep safe any intangible leads that might be on her phone. Yet the risk was immense. They had to pass the bullpen where at least 1 or 2 officers might be manning a desk. Ortiz took a breath. Follow me. Stay low. They retraced steps down another hallway. The echo of voices grew louder. When they rounded a corner, they saw a desk with a single deputy flipping through a newspaper. He had a sidearm at his waist and a radio on his belt. If he looked up, he'd see them instantly. The evidence room door lay behind him, maybe 20 feet away. A quick glance told Rachel the deputy was Wyatt, a younger man who'd given her suspicious looks when she first visited the station. She exchanged a glance with Ortiz. No way to slip by him unseen. Ortiz's face hardened with resolve. She gestured for Rachel to stay back, then strode into the corridor. Hey, Wyatt, Ortiz called casually, stepping into his line of sight. He startled, nearly dropping his paper. Ortiz, impact. She stifled a cry of pain, then forced herself upright. Both women darted toward a cluster of parked civilian cars around the corner. Any second now, alarms might ring, or an officer might exit the station. They merged onto a side street that ran behind the building. It was quiet, still early enough that traffic was minimal. A stray dog sniffed garbage by a loading dock. Rachel turned to Ortiz, breath ragged. We need shelter now. Ortiz nodded. My friend's place isn't safe anymore. I told her to leave town. But maybe we can hide at the Desert Star, your motel. Rachel grimaced. That's the first place they'll look for me. They fell into an urgent trot, hugging the side of the building to remain out of sight. Ortiz suddenly grabbed Rachel's arm, pointing to a battered sedan parked near a vacant lot. Look, she whispered. Keys are in the ignition. It was a gamble, stolen property. But they were desperate. As they approached, Rachel saw a "Ratty for sale" sign in the window, half faded. The door was unlocked. Ortiz slid into the driver's seat, rummaging for the keys. Sure enough, they dangled from the steering column. Perhaps the owner hoped for a quick sale or was just careless. Rachel glanced around. No alarm. Let's do it. The engine coughed to life, billowing a puff of black smoke from the exhaust. They peeled out of the vacant lot, heading away from the station with hearts hammering. In the rearview mirror, the police building shrank into the distance. No immediate pursuit yet, but that could change at any second. They drove in tense silence for several blocks, navigating side streets to avoid main thoroughfares. The sun climbed higher, bathing Shadow Creek in a warm glow that belied the ugliness beneath. Ortiz's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Rachel clutched her side, pain flaring. Let's get out of the immediate area, Rachel said. Find somewhere hidden with a phone we can use. Ortiz nodded. We can try the outskirts, near that old trailer park. Less traffic. Maybe we can regroup. They sped north, weaving through back roads. At a dilapidated sign reading Sunny Sands Trailer Park, Ortiz turned in. Rows of rusting mobile homes sprawled beneath the desert sun, many abandoned or in disrepair. A few had boarded up windows, others had tattered curtains flapping in the breeze. It looked like a graveyard of broken lives, half the trailers vacant. If they wanted anonymity, this was as good a place as any. Ortiz parked behind a double-wide with a sagging porch. Rachel scanned the area for watchers, no sign of movement. She eased out every step, a reminder of her battered muscles. Ortiz followed. Together, they approached the trailer's rear door, which hung ajar. A quick peek inside revealed an interior thick with dust, furniture covered in old sheets, a stale stench that suggested no one had lived there in years. They slipped in, shutting the door behind them. Ortiz flicked a light switch, nothing. The power had likely been cut off long ago. They navigated by the sun's rays filtering through the grimy windows, eventually settling in what used to be a living room. Rachel sank onto a moldy couch, wincing. Her head spun from pain and exhaustion. Ortiz crouched beside her, rummaging through the duffel bag she'd kept from the orchard fiasco. She produced a small first aid kit, gauze, disinfectant, painkillers. She began gingerly cleaning the cuts on Rachel's face and arms. "You sure it's safe here?" Rachel murmured, eyes heavy. Ortiz shrugged, voice low. "Safe enough for now. Hardly anyone comes out here." Rachel forced a grateful half-smile. "Thank you." They fell into a subdued silence as Ortiz patched Rachel's bruises. The sting of antiseptic was harsh, but Rachel gritted her teeth, grateful for the care. When Ortiz was done, Rachel reciprocated, applying gauze to small cuts on Ortiz's legs from the razor wire. They worked in near silence, the hush broken only by the wind rustling the trailer's loose siding. Finally, Rachel's mind cleared enough to lay out the next steps. They still had the damning footage from Narrow's Pass, presumably stashed in Rachel's motel dresser. She prayed no one had discovered it. They needed that evidence more than ever. Without it, they had no proof of the smuggling operation and no leverage against Davis and Hightower. "Ortiz," Rachel began, "I have the meat footage hidden in my motel room. We need to retrieve it. That camcorder is everything." Ortiz swallowed, nodding. "We'll need a plan. The motel might be under surveillance. They know you've stayed there." A strangled laugh escaped Rachel. "Understatement. But we can't leave that evidence behind." The deputy's expression turned resolute. "Then let's do it. Tonight, after dark. We'll sneak in, grab the camera, and get out." Rachel agreed, but worry gnawed at her. Every minute they waited, the wolves or the cops might tear her room apart. She checked her phone. Miraculously, it still had some battery. No signal bars, though. The building's structure or the remote location might be interfering. She moved to a window, raising the phone, but still no luck. Perhaps Shadow Creek's cell coverage was spotty out here. Frustration mounted. She yearned to contact someone, anyone outside the county. With the footage, they could blow the lid off the entire operation. But how? The library's internet was heavily filtered and the station obviously compromised. A local payphone, if one even existed, could be tapped. The post office was equally risky. Nonetheless, they had to try. For now, secrecy was paramount. She and Ortiz settled into an uneasy vigil, waiting for darkness. They took turns napping. Ortiz dozed first, pistol in hand. Then Rachel tried to rest, though every attempt to shift position jolted her bruised ribs. As dusk approached, they prepared to move. The day had passed uneventfully, no sign of patrolling vehicles in the trailer park, no one pounding at their makeshift hideout door. Perhaps the station was in disarray, uncertain how two escapees had vanished. Or maybe it was the calm before the storm. Slipping outside, they found the stolen sedan untouched. Darkness enveloped the trailer park, only a faint glow from the distant town lights. Their breath felt loud in the hush of the desert night. Rachel forced her battered body into the passenger seat, scanning the perimeter warily. Ortiz started the engine. "Let's keep the headlights off until we hit the main road." They pulled away, creeping through the labyrinth of abandoned trailers. At the exit, Ortiz flicked the lights on, accelerating onto the highway leading back into Shadow Creek. The roads were still, lined with closed shops and dim street lamps. A few dusty trucks passed by, but not enough to hide in heavy traffic. They had to rely on caution. Soon, they reached the Desert Star Motel. Ortiz parked a block away, behind a shuttered convenience store. From there, they approached on foot, hearts hammering. The neon sign of the Desert Star flickered weakly, reflecting off the dusty vehicles in the lot. A single occupant walked out of room 2, a cigarette glowing in the dim light. Otherwise, the place looked deserted. Rachel scanned for watchers, no tinted sedans this time. They slipped around the back, hugging the walls until they reached room 8. A faint murmur of a television or radio came through the adjacent units. Rachel tested the doorknob, locked as expected. She fumbled for her motel key, which was in her wallet. By some miracle, they hadn't tossed it out. She inserted the key, praying the lock was unchanged. It clicked. She inhaled, turning the knob slowly. The door creaked open onto darkness. Ortiz clicked on a small flashlight, shining it around. The room was as Rachel had left it, bed unmade, cheap lamp on the nightstand, battered dresser. Dust motes drifted in the beam of light. Rachel motioned for Ortiz to watch the door while she went to the dresser. She pulled it away from the wall, unscrewed the back panel with her multi-tool. Inside, nestled in a wrapped t-shirt, lay the camcorder and binoculars. Relief flared in her chest. She carefully placed the camcorder in a small backpack Ortiz had brought. Next, she inspected it, toggling the power to confirm it still worked. The battery was half drained but functional. The memory card, presumably with the damning Narrows Pass footage, was still inside. They were in business. Ortiz hovered at the window, peering through a slit in the curtain. No movement outside. Good, Rachel murmured, pressing the camcorder's flap closed. Now we have to find a way to get this footage out of town. Ortiz turned, a determined glint in her eye. There's a phone at the diner that can make outbound long-distance calls if we can't get cell service. We can contact someone you trust. Maybe they can send help or instruct us how to transmit the footage safely. Rachel nodded. We'll try that. Or if the library is open in the morning, we might find a way to bypass their filters. I tried once, but the system blocked me. Another approach might be a local phone store to buy a new SIM card with better coverage. But that's a risk if the store owner is allied with the wolves. They could debate the details all night, but time was of the essence. Let's go, Rachel said. Staying here is too dangerous. Ortiz flicked off the flashlight. Rachel paused at the door, heart twisting with a pang of regret. She had spent nights in this room strategizing how to free the town from its stranglehold. Now she might never return. But that was the price of a mission like this. They slipped out into the warm desert night, quietly locking up behind them. Ortiz led the way around the back of the motel. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Hands where I can see, Em. They froze. A deputy stepped from behind a parked car, weapon drawn. Another figure emerged to their right, Detective Hightower, a malevolent smirk on his face. A pair of Desert Wolves bikers flanked him, armed with sidearms. The group had formed a semicircle, boxing Rachel and Ortiz in. Rachel's stomach plummeted. They'd been ambushed and there was no immediate cover. Hightower's gaze settled on the backpack Ortiz clutched. Well, he drawled. Did you really think we wouldn't watch the motel? One of the bikers, Crank, let out a low chuckle, tapping a bandage on his forehead. Told you we'd catch you, you Navy freak. Ortiz's eyes darted around for an escape route, but they were surrounded. She gripped her sidearm, which was still holstered. If she reached for it, the men would open fire. They were outnumbered, outgunned, pinned in an open lot. Hightower eyed the bag. I'm guessing that's the footage. Hand it over. Rachel steadied her breathing. She couldn't let them have that camcorder. It was the only real leverage they possessed. But any sudden move would be suicide. Her mind raced. If we give it up, we're dead anyway. Throw it here, Hightower ordered, his voice taut. For a moment, Ortiz tensed as if to toss the bag. But Rachel laid a hand on Ortiz's arm, stepping forward. You want it. She held up her free hand, feigning surrender. Fine. She took a slow step, eyes roving the scene. The deputy on the left was Jenkins, the same man who had beaten her in the interrogation. He licked his lips, finger hovering near the trigger of his Glock. On the right, Crank and Spider, each gripping a pistol, ready to shoot. Rachel locked eyes with Ortiz and gave a tiny nod. The deputy's gaze flickered with understanding. They had one chance to create a distraction, break the circle, and flee. Rachel exhaled slowly, then flung the backpack upward in a high arc. The abrupt motion made everyone's heads jerk skyward. At the same instant, she dove sideways, shouting, Ortiz, go! Gunshots erupted, muzzle flashes lighting the night. Rachel hit the ground hard, pain exploding in her side. She scrambled behind the edge of a parked sedan, bullets pinging off the metal. Ortiz sprinted in the opposite direction, returning fire with quick shots that forced Hightower and his men to scatter. The backpack landed on the asphalt with a thud, contents spilling. One of the bikers rushed toward it, ignoring the hail of bullets. Ortiz's shot clipped his shoulder, spinning him around, but he managed to grab the camcorder. Blood spattered the pavement as he clutched it like a prize. Rachel, crouched behind the sedan, fired 3 careful shots at Jenkins's feet. He ducked behind a truck, cursing. She risked a quick glance at Ortiz, who was pinned behind a low wall near the motel's dumpster. The backpack itself lay strewn, but the crucial item, the camera, was in the biker's hands. "Got it," he yelled to Hightower, brandishing the device. A surge of desperation fueled Rachel. "We can't let them escape with it." She fired again, bullets ricocheting. Spider advanced on her position, forcing her deeper behind the sedan. She heard Hightower shouting orders, "Fall back. Get that footage to Davis." Crank moved to cover the wounded biker, who was staggering away with the camcorder. Adrenaline ignited Rachel's SEAL instincts. She leaped up, returning fire with deadly precision. One round struck Crank's vest, not fatal but enough to knock him backward. Another bullet shattered the wounded biker's knee, sending him to the ground. The camcorder clattered across the asphalt once more. Spider swore and grabbed it, bolting toward a police SUV parked nearby. Hightower and Jenkins provided cover fire, forcing Rachel and Ortiz to take cover again. Ortiz's voice cracked over the gunfire. "We can't let them leave with that camera." Rachel's mind screamed for a solution. They were pinned down and the SUV's engine roared to life as Spider jumped in. Hightower sprinted after it, Jenkins close behind, diving into the passenger side. The vehicle peeled out, tires squealing, headlights illuminating the frenzied scene. Crank and the wounded biker were left behind, presumably too injured or disorganized to keep up. Rachel and Ortiz fired a last round each, but the SUV careened around the motel, out of range. The stolen camera was gone. An acrid swirl of gunpowder hung in the air. Crank lay on the asphalt, groaning, while the other biker clutched a shattered knee, howling in agony. A pair of bystanders peeked out of their motel rooms, eyes wide, then quickly slammed their doors. Ortiz crawled over to Rachel, horror etched on her face. "They've got the footage." Rachel's breath rattled. She felt a warm stickiness under her left arm, realized she'd taken a graze from a bullet. Not life-threatening, but painful. She forced herself to stand, leaning against Ortiz. "We have to move. Now." Ortiz nodded, her expression a mask of guilt and anger. "I'm so sorry." Rachel shook her head, pain pounding in her ribs. "We're alive. That's the only reason we can keep fighting." They made a hasty retreat from the motel lot, leaving Crank and the other injured biker behind. The last thing they needed was a new wave of crooked cops arriving. Adrenaline spurred them through dark backstreets, eventually regaining their stolen sedan. They tore out of town, hearts hammering, past the neon diner signs and shuttered shops. Only once they were back on a remote desert track did they finally slow down. The weight of defeat pressed on Rachel's chest. The camera gone. All the precious evidence captured at Narrows Pass was in Hightower's hands. Ortiz slammed a fist on the steering wheel. All that planning, all that risk, and they have it now. "We're screwed." Rachel leaned her head back, fighting back despair. "We're not done yet. The memory card is worthless to them if they can't open or delete it. I set up a password-protected file, Ortiz, do you remember? I told you about that. They might destroy the whole device, but there's still the possibility of backups." Ortiz stared at her. "Backups? You said you tried emailing it from the library, but the firewall blocked you." Rachel's eyes glimmered with a seed of hope. "Wait, I never successfully sent it, but I did manage to copy the files onto the library's desktop, at least temporarily, when I was trying to compress them. The question is whether it's still there. The library computers might auto-wipe everything at log-off, or it might remain in a temp folder." Ortiz's mouth parted in a small gasp of realization. "So there's a chance?" Rachel nodded. "It's a long shot, but yes. If we can get back into that computer, we might recover the compressed zip file. Then we can transfer it onto a USB drive or email it from a less restricted location." Their eyes met, a current of renewed determination flowing between them. It was insane, but in the wake of losing the physical camera, that single digital trace might be their last lifeline. Ortiz turned the wheel, heading toward a deserted stretch of road. "We'll hole up again tonight, patch ourselves up, and tomorrow we'll go to the library first thing. We'll find a way." Rachel let out a slow breath, letting the tension recede just enough to keep from collapsing. In the side mirror, the lights of Shadow Creek glowed faintly. Danger lurked in every corner of that town, but they had no choice. Fate was calling them back yet again. The stakes had never been higher. Late that night, they found themselves in another abandoned trailer near the edges of the county. The stolen sedan was parked in a weed-choked lot behind it. Stars dotted the sky overhead, a silent and unjudging tapestry. Ortiz used the last of her first-aid supplies to dress Rachel's fresh bullet graze. It stung fiercely, but the bleeding had slowed. In the dim lantern light, Rachel surveyed Ortiz's haggard face. The deputy's once firm demeanor was shaken by the repeated betrayals, the violence, the near misses. Yet underneath the fear, Ortiz's eyes still gleamed with a stubborn resolve that reminded Rachel of the best soldiers she'd served with. "How's your arm?" Ortiz asked quietly, checking the bandage. Rachel mustered a wry half-smile. "Better than my ribs." They shared a grim chuckle, the only levity in a dark situation. A hush fell, replaced by the desert wind moaning through broken trailer windows. Each crack and pop of settling metal made them flinch, half expecting an armed biker or crooked cop to burst in. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "Tomorrow, we get to that library the moment it opens. We'll try to recover the file. But we also need a contingency if that fails." Ortiz nodded, rubbing tired eyes. "Contingency like, what?" "We have no more proof and the town's entire law enforcement apparatus wants us dead." Rachel exhaled. "We can't rely on the local authorities. We'd need outside help, FBI, state troopers, maybe even my old contact from the Navy. But to call them, we need a secure line or cell signal. That's one reason I want to check the library. Maybe we can do an online call or find an old phone directory for statewide numbers. Any method to reach someone who can intervene quickly." The deputy massaged her temples, fatigue written into every line of her posture. "God, this is so insane. The wolves have been terrorizing this place for years, but I never guessed how deep it went. Davis, Hightower, it's like the entire system is rotten." Rachel laid a hand gently on Ortiz's shoulder. "We'll fix it. One step at a time." She paused, meeting Ortiz's gaze with intensity. "Thank you, by the way. If it weren't for you, I'd still be in that cell." Ortiz swallowed. "I just wish I'd had the courage to act sooner. To gather more files or talk to a state official." Rachel squeezed her shoulder. "We're acting now. That's what counts." They decided on a watch rotation again, each taking half the night to sleep. Rachel drifted off around midnight, lulled by the relentless ache in her body. Her dreams were a kaleidoscope of memories, military deployments, the crash of helicopter blades, the swirling dust of faraway deserts. But always, the image of the desert wolf's patch intruded, a snarling emblem that refused to fade. She awoke to Ortiz gently shaking her. Early dawn light crept through the trailer's warped door. Rachel sat up with a groan, pressing a hand to her side. "Time?" "About 5:30, Ortiz replied. "We should move soon." They shared a canteen, each sipping the last of the water. Then they limped back to the sedan. The engine coughed to life, and they headed toward Shadow Creek's modest downtown. The library opened at 7 a.m. on weekdays, a small sign posted in its window. That gave them a little over an hour. They found a hidden spot to park near the post office, a side alley partially blocked by discarded furniture. Then, carefully, they entered the local cafe across the street, hoping to blend in with early risers. The smell of coffee and bacon greeted them, incongruously cozy. A handful of patrons nursed hot drinks, flipping through newspapers. No one paid them much attention yet. They took a corner booth, ordering coffee and toast. Rachel scanned the street through the window while Ortiz quietly devoured the meal, both on edge. Another day in Shadow Creek. Another day in the lion's den. Finally, 7 a.m. approached. They paid cash. Rachel was nearly out of physical money and slipped out, crossing the street to the squat, single-story library. Just as Rachel remembered, a dusty sign above the door read Shadow Creek Public Library. The same middle-aged librarian with a tight bun sat behind the front desk. She gave them a polite smile, apparently not recognizing them or not caring. Rachel forced a calm demeanor. "Morning." "Good morning," the librarian replied. "Looking for anything in particular?" "Just the computers," Rachel said. "I need to do some research." The librarian gestured to the 4 ancient desktops near the back, exactly as Rachel recalled. "We haven't had anyone in yet this morning, so they're all yours." Rachel and Ortiz found the one farthest from the entrance, less chance of being observed. Ortiz sat beside her, scanning the library for watchers while Rachel booted up the machine. It whirred painfully, its tower vibrating under the desk. The splash screen loaded, prompting for a simple login. She typed guest as she had done before. The system took a moment to warm up. Then the outdated Windows desktop appeared. Her heart hammered. Would any trace of the zip file remain in the local drive? She had tried to attach it to an email weeks earlier and encountered a firewall block. Still, some libraries stored temporary files if the user forgot to wipe them. She clicked My Computer, selected the main drive, and scrolled to Documents, Downloads, Temp, Recent. The library's filter sometimes automatically cleared user files, but maybe the folder had lingered. Each directory responded with slow, sputtering progress. Her pulse quickened with each passing second. Anything? Ortiz whispered, anxiety brimming in her voice. Rachel tensed. Nothing obvious in the standard folders. She typed keywords into the search bar, Narrows, SC_police, cartel, wolves. Her own memory was fuzzy about what she'd named the file. She tried desert, Shadow Creek_evidence, and backup. The search tool meandered, returning 0 results. Her chest tightened with frustration and fear. They needed a miracle. Ortiz lightly touched her shoulder. Keep trying. Maybe check the recycle bin. With shaky fingers, Rachel opened the recycle bin. A cascade of old documents filled the window, presumably from prior users. She recognized none of the file names until she scrolled to something labeled sc_police_compress.zip. Heart pounding, she double-clicked. The system displayed a message, File has been deleted. Would you like to restore? She nearly shouted in triumph. Instead, she forced herself to remain calm. Yes, she whispered, selecting Restore. The file reappeared in a Restored Files folder. She navigated there, heart in her throat. The zip file was a few megabytes in size, the correct ballpark for the spreadsheets, logs, and text transcripts Ortiz had originally copied. She double-clicked and a password prompt popped up. Perfect. That meant the data was still encrypted, safe from prying eyes. Ortiz inhaled, leaning closer. Thank God. Rachel typed her old password, one that combined a random string plus an inside reference to a SEAL motto. The zip opened, revealing a trove of subfolders, roots, finances, police logs, cartel ops. She scrolled through them, verifying the contents. This was indeed the same data from the flash drive. The last sliver of hope they had. Quick, let's transfer it, Ortiz said, rummaging through her pockets. She froze. We don't have a USB drive, do we? Rachel suppressed a curse. Damn it. We can't just leave it here. She considered emailing the zip to a secure account. That was the plan last time, but the library's firewall blocked attachments. Maybe if they used a web-based cloud drive or some file transfer service. The system might allow small uploads, or the filter might have changed. She had to try. She navigated to a basic email site, quickly creating a new account, email protected. She attached the zip file and typed a subject line, urgent, see attached. As she clicked send, the progress bar crept forward. Then a pop-up. Attachment blocked by library security. File type not permitted. Her heart sank. No success there. She tried a well-known cloud storage service. Another pop-up. This site is blocked by library administration. Time bled away. The librarian was tapping away at her own desk, not paying them much mind yet, but any second someone might wander in. Another approach, rename the file extension. She changed it from .zip to .zzz. Sometimes that circumvented filters. She tried emailing again. The attachment bar progressed to 25%, 50%, 70%, then froze. Connection timed out. Try again. She stifled a groan. This archaic system was unbelievably stubborn. Ortiz hovered, tension radiating from her. We're running out of time. Someone's bound to come in or notice. Rachel pressed her lips together. All right, let's rename each subfile individually, maybe compress them in smaller batches. The filter might let smaller attachments through. She set to work, dividing the folder into segments, roots.zip, finances.zip, policelogs.zip, each only a fraction of the total size. She renamed them to random extensions, .docs, .pdfx, trying to slip past the filter. Then she attempted to attach them one at a time to an email. The first file, a partial success, it reached 100% upload, then displayed. Attachment is too large or not recognized. Blocked. Rachel clenched her fist, her nails digging into her palm. This system was a digital fortress from the 1990s. She also realized there was likely a maximum file size that the library's email policy enforced. Ortiz placed a soothing hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out." Time ticked. Another idea surfaced. We can break the zip into very small pieces. The rummaging might take forever, though. Ortiz scanned the library. A single older gentleman had entered, flipping through books in a far aisle. The librarian was still at the desk, glancing at them occasionally. Tension ratcheted higher. They didn't have the luxury of an hour to fuss with multiple mini-attachments. Then Rachel spotted the library's paper print station in the corner. A laser printer sat behind glass. People could print documents from the computers, paying a small fee to the librarian. Printing the entire trove of data, dozens of spreadsheets, would be unwieldy, but it might at least preserve something. But so many documents would raise suspicion, and printing reams of data could take ages. Her mind churned. What if we convert the critical pages to images or a PDF with minimal pages? Enough to prove corruption. She rummaged through the files, selecting the most damning ones. Davis's signature on a payment log, Hightower's communications referencing desert wolves, and direct references to large shipments of meth, heroin, and firearms. Even if they didn't have the entire set, these snapshots might suffice as proof. Rachel quickly loaded a free PDF printer program from the outdated system. Miraculously, it was still installed from a time she tried to do something similar. She combined the selected pages into a single PDF, naming it shadowcreek_proof.pdf. The final document was about 15 pages. She tested opening it. The lines of text were small but legible enough to show transaction logs, dates, amounts, references to bribes, and a few incriminating messages about officer protection. Now, the next step, printing it. She clicked print, selected the paper print station, and braced for the cost. The system told her it would be $1.50 total, 10 cents a page. She didn't have much money left, but enough for 15 pages. She gulped, hoping the librarian wouldn't ask too many questions. Ortiz hovered behind her, pistol concealed under her jacket. "Do it." Rachel pulled a couple of crumpled bills from her wallet. They walked to the printing station in the corner. The machine hummed to life, spitting out pages. The data was small, but each line could be read if you looked close. She flipped through them anxiously, checking clarity. Perfect, clear enough to see references to Hightower, Davis, Cartel, and Desert Wolves. She paid the librarian, who raised an eyebrow at the content. "Interesting reading?" the woman asked. Rachel forced a tight smile. "Research for a journalistic piece." She slid the money across the counter and hurried away. They returned to the computer for one last attempt at digital transfer, but it was hopeless. With the PDF printed, they at least had physical proof in hand. Not as extensive as the full trove, but enough to implicate the key players. If they could deliver these pages to a trustworthy authority, it might suffice to launch an outside investigation. They thanked the librarian curtly and left. Ortiz tucked the folded pages into her inner jacket pocket. "We have to guard these with our lives." Rachel nodded grimly. "Now we find a phone to call for help. Let's try the diner's landline again. If we can reach my friend Tom Grayson in Denver, maybe he can contact someone in the state or federal government to intervene." They kept to side streets, avoiding major intersections. The diner lay a few blocks away, a squat building with a flickering neon sign, open 24/7. They carefully scanned the lot, no police cruisers or biker gatherings. Seemed safe enough for the moment. Stepping inside, they were greeted by the usual stale coffee aroma. A lone waitress bustled behind the counter, refilling salt shakers. Rachel and Ortiz took a booth near the back, out of direct line of sight from the street. A couple of ranchers sat up front, wearing sweat-stained hats and talking quietly. The overhead lights buzzed with fluorescent indifference. The waitress approached, eyeing them with a hint of recognition. Rachel realized they'd been in and out of this diner multiple times. The waitress offered a guarded smile. "Mornin'. Y'all want coffee?" Rachel cleared her throat. "Please." Ortiz nodded. "And a side of toast." The waitress jotted notes, then paused. "Ain't you the deputy that folks said went missing?" Ortiz stiffened. "I'm still on duty, just undercover. So please keep it quiet." The woman's eyes widened, curiosity warring with caution. Finally, she nodded, stepping away to place the order. Rachel exhaled, tension flaring. They had to be careful. Gossip traveled fast in small towns. Rachel spied the payphone near the restroom hall, a relic from an earlier era but presumably functional for local or long-distance calls if you had coins or a calling card. She rummaged in her pockets, counting out change. Enough for a short call, hopefully. As soon as the waitress delivered their coffee, Rachel got up, crossing to the phone. She inserted coins, dialed Tom Grayson's private line from memory. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Her stomach clenched with each unanswered beep. At the 7th ring, it went to a generic voicemail. She left a terse message. Tom, it's Rachel Morrison. Urgent. Call this number back. Extension. She read the payphone's extension plate. Shadow Creek, Arizona. Danger. Please. The line cut off, out of coins. She slammed the receiver down. No guarantee he'd call back on a payphone. She inserted more change, thinking to try another contact, maybe her old commanding officer. But that number was less certain. She typed it in anyway, heart pounding. The phone rang and rang. No pickup. She left another cryptic message, hoping she didn't sound unhinged. Walking back to the booth, she saw Ortiz gazing at the folded stack of printed pages, carefully hidden in the inner pocket. No answer? Ortiz asked quietly. Rachel shook her head. Not yet. We can try again later. Maybe we can get a cell signal outside of town. They sipped their coffee, the weariness of the last days pressing down like a heavy blanket. Rachel wondered if they'd ever get out of the swirling nightmare. The waitress refilled their cups, giving them a concerned glance but not prying further. Halfway through the second cup, the diner's door swung open. Rachel tensed, hand drifting toward her holstered sidearm. It was a teenage boy in a baggy t-shirt, not a threat. She let out a slow breath, trying to calm her nerves. Ortiz tapped the table. If the diner phone plan fails, we can try the next county over. Just drive until we get a stronger cell signal. But we need to be sure we're not tailed. Rachel nodded. Agreed. Let's do that. We have enough gas in the stolen sedan for a decent distance. We'll keep an eye out for roadblocks. If we get out of Shadow Creek with these papers, we might outrun the wolves' immediate network. They paid for their coffee, left a tip, and stepped outside. The day was bright, heat already radiating off the pavement. Their stolen sedan was parked around the corner out of direct sight. Rachel led the way, scanning for watchers. The air felt ominously still. As they approached the car, a sinking feeling gnawed at Rachel. Something's off, she whispered. They turned the corner and both froze. 2 of the sedan's tires were slashed, sagging like deflated balloons. A scrawled message in spray paint marred the driver's side door. Wolves own you. Ortiz hissed a curse. Damn it. No sign of the culprits. They must have done it while Rachel and Ortiz were inside the diner. Maybe it was a random wolf passing by or an orchestrated sabotage. Either way, they were now on foot again. Rachel's mind raced. Another vehicle? Carl's help? But calling Carl again would put a target on his back. They might not have a choice. She stepped toward a payphone on the street corner, rummaging for more coins. Before she could reach it, the distant wail of sirens split the air. The sirens grew louder by the second, echoing off the buildings. Ortiz grabbed Rachel's arm, eyes wide. We need to move. They took off running, adrenaline spiking. They ducked into a narrow alley, the rancid smell of garbage hitting them. At the far end, an old chain-link fence barred the way. They scrambled over, hearts hammering, ignoring fresh scrapes. Emerging onto a side street, they heard the sirens pass by their previous location. A quick glance showed 2 police cruisers racing toward the diner. Rachel's throat constricted. Had someone in the diner recognized Ortiz? Or was it standard patrol responding to a vandalism call? Either way, they were fugitives. Rachel clutched her side as they ran, each footstep sending jolts of pain through her ribs. Ortiz kept pace, scanning for an escape route. They spotted a local hardware store with a side entrance ajar. Perhaps the employees were receiving a shipment. With no better option, they ducked inside. The store interior was dim and cluttered, rows of shelving with tools, paint cans, and garden supplies. A startled stock clerk opened his mouth to protest, but Ortiz flashed her badge. Police business, don't worry. The clerk shut up, stepping aside in confusion. Rachel and Ortiz slipped to the rear, between towering shelves. The storeroom door offered an exit, presumably leading to a loading dock. They eased it open, finding a small fenced area with pallets. The The fence itself was only 5 feet high, less menacing than barbed wire. They hopped over, dropping into a narrow alley behind the store. Breathing ragged, they pressed themselves against a brick wall, scanning the street beyond. The sirens had faded. Maybe the cops were searching the diner. They had only a narrow window to leave the area. "Let's head to the suburbs," Ortiz said, voice strained. "There's a stretch of empty houses up on Mesa Drive. We can hide, then try again to get out of town on foot." Rachel frowned. Foot travel across the desert? That would be excruciating, especially in midday heat, and they were injured. But they had no immediate alternative. "All right, let's do it. We move fast, stick to back roads, avoid main intersections. If we see any vehicle we can borrow, or if we find someone friendly." Ortiz's jaw tightened. "Yes, we'll do that." They hustled down the alley, emerging onto a residential street with modest houses. Lawns were mostly patches of dirt, battered mailboxes leaning precariously. A dog barked in a fenced yard. Overhead, the sun blazed, punishing in its intensity. They trudged 3 blocks before the first police cruiser appeared at the far intersection. Rachel and Ortiz ducked behind a parked RV, hearts pounding, watching as the cruiser rolled by, scanning the sidewalks. The cops didn't spot them this time, continuing on. Once the cruiser vanished, they resumed. The next 2 blocks were eerily quiet. Many houses had boarded windows or battered cars on cinder blocks. The recession had clearly hit Shadow Creek hard. They turned onto Mesa Drive, which climbed a slight hill, offering a panoramic view of the desert to the west. There, they found a row of abandoned houses, foreclosure signs half fallen, overgrown yards thick with tumbleweeds. The perfect place to lay low. Selecting a small ranch-style home with no visible, no trespassing signage, they tested the door. Locked. Ortiz used her multi-tool, but the knob refused to budge. They circled to the back, found a broken window, and carefully removed enough shards to crawl in. The interior was stripped bare, floors dusty, a stale odor of disuse. Still, it provided shade and a measure of concealment. They settled in what used to be the living room, sinking onto the floor. Both were slick with sweat, breathing heavily. Ortiz wiped her brow. "We can't keep this up forever." Rachel silently agreed. They had the printed pages, proving monstrous corruption, but no feasible way to get them into the right hands. For a moment, despair threatened to smother her. But she drew on her SEAL training. Adversity was the crucible in which solutions were forged. She turned to Ortiz. "We need to get out of town. On foot, if we must. The next county seat is about 40 miles. That's a long trek, especially in this heat, but maybe we can do it at night. Or we find a sympathetic local who has a working vehicle." Ortiz stared at the dust motes swirling in the faint light. "What about Carl?" Rachel hesitated. "We've leaned on him enough. If we call him, he'll come, but we risk him getting killed. Still, he might be our best bet. He's the only one outside the department we trust." Ortiz nodded reluctantly. "We can at least see if he's willing. If not, we figure something else out." They decided to wait until dusk, then quietly slip to a payphone or a friendlier part of town to find Carl. In the meantime, they needed rest. Each took turns napping again, though the scorching midday sun baked the house until the air felt suffocating. Rachel dreamed uneasy visions of wolf patches and Hightower's sneer. When the sky finally glowed with the gold of late afternoon, they stirred. Ortiz's phone beeped once, no signal, but the battery still functioned. She scrolled, rechecking old messages. Rachel, sipping from a battered water bottle found in a kitchen cupboard, the water tasted stale but better than nothing, tried to muster enough energy for another infiltration. Suddenly, a noise outside, the crunch of gravel under tires. Rachel's eyes snapped wide. She and Ortiz exchanged alarmed glances. They ducked behind a collapsed wall, peeking through the broken window. A white pickup had pulled into the driveway. A tall man stepped out. "Carl." Rachel's heart hammered. How did he find them here? Was it really him or a trap? She tensed, checking the weapon at her side, but then recognized his posture and the battered old cap he always wore. He hovered by the truck, scanning the yard. "Rachel?" "Ortiz," he called softly. They emerged, relief mingled with confusion. Carl took off his cap, exhaling. "I've been looking everywhere for y'all. Word on the street is the cops are turning over every stone. Thought you might be up here." Rachel approached him warily. "How'd you guess?" He shrugged. "Heard about some abandoned houses in Mesa Drive. It was a hunch. I saw fresh footprints leading in from the alley. He paused, eyes flicking with concern. You both look like hell. Ortiz managed a weary chuckle. We feel worse. Carl glanced around, lowering his voice. Listen, the wolves in half the department are on a manhunt for you too. They put out bulletins, said you're armed and dangerous. Folks in town are spooked. But me, I don't buy their story. I know you're the good guys here. Rachel placed a hand on his arm. Thank you, Carl. He nodded. I can get you out of town, take you at least a few counties over. But we gotta move quick. Davis or Hightower has roadblocks on the main highways. We'll have to take back roads, maybe an old smuggler's route near the canyons. The desert wolves use it sometimes, so it ain't exactly safe. Ortiz swallowed. Anything's better than rotting here. Carl led them to the truck, scanning the street for watchers. The sun was just beginning to set, bathing the western sky in burnt orange. They hurried into the cab, Rachel in front, Ortiz sliding into the back. Carl started the engine, a deep rumble, and eased the truck onto the deserted road. Rachel clutched the precious printed pages, her lifeline to justice. The battered seat springs squeaked under her shifting weight. Through the windshield, the last of the day's sun glowed across the horizon. They had a chance, one last escape out of the wolves' territory if luck favored them. As they left Shadow Creek's outskirts, Carl turned onto a dirt road that wound through jagged hills. The truck jostled and rattled with each rut. Sagebrush and cacti whirled by in the twilight gloom. Rachel glanced at the side mirror. No immediate pursuit, though paranoia bit at her heels. Carl flicked on his headlights as darkness thickened. We keep heading north, then cut west through another pass. Might see some old wolf lookouts, but hopefully they ain't patrolling tonight. Ortiz gripped the back of the seat. Thank you, Carl. Whatever happens, know we appreciate this. He just nodded, expression set. Y'all deserve better than getting hunted by those criminals. They drove in tense silence for an hour, the truck bouncing over rough terrain. Occasionally, lights from a distant ranch flickered across the valley. The moon rose, silvering the desert peaks. Rachel felt a surge of optimism, maybe they were actually going to make it out. Suddenly, Carl hissed, "Ah, hell?" Ahead, across the dusty road, a cluster of lights and shapes. Vehicles parked in a row, headlights glaring. A roadblock. Rachel's blood ran cold. A half-dozen motorcycles, plus at least 2 SUVs. Figures moved around them, likely wolves. One carried a rifle, the silhouette unmistakable. Another brandished a flashlight, sweeping it across the road. Carl killed the headlights, stopping the truck well back before they were spotted. He cut the engine, plunging them into darkness. The desert wind howled gently. Rachel peered through the windshield, no chance to bypass them. The terrain on either side was too rough for a vehicle. Ortiz whispered, "We can't turn around, they'll see our taillights, chase us down." Carl grimaced. "We might hide the truck behind that rocky outcrop, then go on foot." Rachel clenched her fist. "But how do we slip past the blockade on foot? They look like at least 8 or 9 men. Possibly more." Ortiz's voice trembled with suppressed tension. "We're outgunned." Carl sighed. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize they'd set up here. This route used to be off their radar." Rachel exhaled, old SEAL instincts kicking in. "We do have the element of surprise, they don't know we're here. If we can find a vantage point, we might pick them off or cause a diversion." Ortiz's eyes widened. "You're talking about a firefight with a small army of wolves." Rachel forced calm. "I'm talking about survival. If we can't pass them, we're stuck. The only alternative is turning around, heading back to Shadow Creek, which is equally suicidal." Carl eyed the side mirror, worry etched in his features. "I'm no soldier, Ms. Morrison, but I'll do whatever you say." She nodded, mind racing with possibilities. She had her sidearm, 8 rounds left in the magazine. Ortiz presumably had about the same. Carl might have a hunting rifle stashed? She shot him a questioning glance. "Got a shotgun behind the seat," he admitted. 2 shells loaded for more in the glove box. Not much, but better than nothing. They formulated a hasty plan, parked the truck behind a ridge. Rachel and Ortiz would approach the roadblock on foot, under cover of darkness, and try to neutralize or scare off the wolves. Carl would hang back, shotgun ready, providing fallback support. They executed step 1. Carl reversed slowly, parking the truck behind a cluster of large rocks, out of the direct line of sight. The engine ticked as it cooled in the nighttime air. They distributed the meager weaponry. Ortiz tested her pistol, checking the magazine. Rachel inhaled, pushing through the pain in her ribs. She was in no condition for a protracted firefight, but desperation provided adrenaline. They set out, creeping through the desert scrub. The silhouettes of the wolves' vehicles glowed in the near distance, headlights stabbing across the dusty road. Shouts and occasional laughter drifted on the breeze. The men must have been bored, waiting for any sign of traffic to intercept. Flattening themselves behind a low ridge, Rachel raised her head to peer through binoculars. She counted 9 men in total. 2 SUVs, 6 motorcycles, multiple firearms. They had set up a makeshift barricade of spiked chains across the road. Any unsuspecting vehicle would be forced to stop or else blow out the tires. Ortiz swallowed. We can't just shoot them all. That's insane. Rachel nodded. We cause a distraction that draws half of them away, then slip around with Carl. We only engage if they spot us. We do not want a prolonged shootout. Ortiz let out a shaky breath. All right. A plan formed. They found a cluster of boulders near the far side of the road. Rachel would circle left, toss a flare or rock to create noise on the right. When the wolves investigated, Carl and Ortiz would cross behind the blockade with the truck or on foot. Rachel would hold position to cover them, then follow once the path was clear. The glaring hole, they had no actual flare. Rachel improvised with a rag, a small can of WD-40 Carl had in his truck, and a lighter from Ortiz's pocket. She'd set a small brush fire on the far side, hopefully drawing attention. They separated. Carl quietly drove the truck in a wide arc, aiming to approach the road from the opposite side once the wolves were distracted. Ortiz joined him in the cab, ready to jump out if needed. Rachel crawled through coarse sand, ignoring the sting of cacti spines. The night was silent except for the murmur of the bikers' conversation. Finally, she reached a vantage point about 50 yards from the blockade's right flank. She crouched behind a thorny bush, carefully dousing a wad of cloth in WD-40. Her heart thundered. This was reckless, but there was no other option. She waited for an opportune moment. One man wandered off to relieve himself, another rummaged through an SUV for something. Then Rachel flicked the lighter, igniting the rag. Its small flame guttered in the breeze. She hurled it into a patch of dry brush about 20 yards away. Instantly, the brush caught, crackling with flames that danced higher than she'd anticipated. Sparks lit the desert night. A wave of heat washed over the ground. The wolves' heads whipped toward the sudden blaze. Shouts erupted. Fire! Over there! Rachel prayed the blaze wouldn't spread uncontrollably, but the desert was bone dry. At least it was far enough from the road. A group of 4 wolves, including the man with a rifle, ran toward the flames, yelling for water or shovels. 2 more hopped on their bikes, uncertain if they should move them away from potential spread. Now was the chance. Rachel signaled with a small flashlight blink. Go, Carl, go. Off to the left, the truck's engine revved. Headlights flicked on. Carl floored it, bursting from behind a cluster of rocks, aiming to skirt around the blockade on the side where no spikes were laid. The wolves still near the barricade spotted them, shouting, raising guns. Bullets whizzed through the air, sparks flying off the truck's fender. Carl kept going, ducking low behind the wheel, Ortiz returning fire from the passenger window. Rachel inhaled, counting the muzzle flashes. 2, 3 men shooting. She popped up from her hiding spot and squeezed off 3 shots, each one directed at muzzle flashes. One wolf yelped, collapsing. Another flinched aside, bullet striking near his foot. The barrage slowed, giving Carl's truck an extra second to clear the blockade. The vehicle rumbled past, fishtailing in the dirt, a bullet spiderwebbing the windshield but not stopping them. Meanwhile, the brush fire roared higher, lighting up the desert. The 4 men who had rushed to contain it were trapped between flames and the confusion of the shootout. Shouts of panic echoed. Rachel glimpsed the men near the blockade reloading. She fired again, suppressing them, forcing them to keep their heads down. That gave Carl an open path to accelerate away down the dusty road. Mission accomplished, the truck had made it through. Now Rachel needed to follow, ideally on foot, or find a gap to slip away. She reloaded her pistol with a fresh magazine, her last, and darted low across the terrain. The flames crackled, making the night flicker with orange and black shadows. The wolves' curses and gunshots ricocheted unpredictably. As she sprinted behind a rock formation, a sudden blow knocked her off balance. Pain seared her right shoulder. She stumbled, realized she'd been shot, a grazing wound, maybe. She gritted her teeth, refusing to go down. Another bullet chipped the rock near her face. She flattened herself, returning fire. A wolf cried out in the darkness. Time warped into a frenzy of gunfire, dust, and swirling smoke from the brush fire. Rachel crawled deeper into the rocky outcrops, each breath a struggle. If she could just break line of sight, she might vanish into the night. The men who remained at the blockade were disorganized, half of them fighting flames, half shooting. Still, the gunshots pursued her with lethal intent. At last, she spotted a gully leading away from the road, hidden by a slight rise. With the last of her strength, she scrambled down, sliding on loose rocks. Adrenaline masked some of the pain in her shoulder. The hillside provided enough cover that bullets no longer whizzed overhead. She kept going until the gunfire sounded more distant. Then she collapsed behind a boulder, chest heaving, the taste of copper in her mouth from biting her tongue. Her mind screamed that she needed to keep moving or risk a wolf stumbling upon her. But her body rebelled, battered and near exhaustion. Carl and Ortiz had presumably made it out, continuing north. That was the plan, anyway. Now Rachel had to link up with them or they'd assume she was dead. She pressed a hand to her shoulder wound. It bled, but not profusely. Another gash to add to the rest. Drawing on every ounce of fortitude, Rachel forced herself to her feet. She began staggering away from the blockade, deeper into the desert night. Each step carried her further from Shadow Creek, but also further from safety if she collapsed. The brush fire glowed behind her like a malevolent beacon, and the wolves' shouts echoed faintly in the distance. She had no idea how far Carl and Ortiz would drive before realizing she hadn't caught up. Still, she had the skill set to survive. She'd navigated worse terrain in Afghanistan. She'd find a vantage point at sunrise, regroup, and keep going. The alternative, giving up, was unthinkable. So she pressed on, alone in the darkness, guided by a half-moon and the relentless pulse of survival. In the distance, the hush of the desert pressed against her ears, indifferent to the human violence unfolding in its domain. Rachel Morrison, battered and bleeding, walked deeper into the unknown, determined to carry on the fight, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. Rachel didn't know how long she trudged through the desert after fleeing the roadblock. 1 hour? 2? The night sky was her only companion, jeweled with stars that blurred when pain and fatigue threatened to overwhelm her. Each step jarred her battered ribs, and her shoulder wound wept blood that clung to the fabric of her jacket. She needed medical attention, but nothing lay ahead except emptiness. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, her feet ached with every step. She had no canteen, no water at all, because she'd left it in the truck. The dryness burned her throat, each breath an ordeal. Still, a spark of determination fueled her battered body. Keep going. Don't stop. At last, the faint outline of a rocky plateau loomed. She clambered up a gentle slope, ignoring the twinges in her shoulder. From the plateau's edge, she squinted at the expanse below. The first rays of morning revealed a winding dirt path, possibly an old ranch road or an ATV trail. Could it lead to civilization? Or maybe a lonely ranch house? She descended carefully. The ground was loose, sliding beneath her boots. If she fell, it might be the end. Waves of dizziness assailed her. She paused at a cluster of mesquite bushes, pressing a hand to her throbbing shoulder. Her blood-soaked sleeve stuck to her skin. I need to wrap this. She tore a strip from her shirt, pulling off her jacket to wind the cloth around the wound. Her fingers shook with exhaustion. She stifled a cry as she tightened the makeshift bandage. Then she shrugged her jacket back on, wincing at the friction. At least it slowed the bleeding. Continuing downward, she eventually reached the bottom of the slope. The path was rutted, overgrown with desert scrub. She followed it, each step a testament to grit. The morning sun flared hot and merciless. Memories of SEER training returned, desert survival, rationing water, seeking shade. But she had no supplies. After what felt like another hour, a shape emerged on the horizon, a humble shack with a sagging porch. A corral behind it suggested it might be an old ranch outpost. She half ran, half stumbled toward it, hope sparking. Maybe there's water. Maybe help. The shack appeared abandoned, windows boarded, the door slightly ajar. She pushed it open, revealing a single dusty room filled with old junk. A battered table, a few chairs, empty cans scattered about. Cobwebs clung to every corner. No occupant. No immediate sign of water. Rachel's vision blurred. She staggered to the table and sank into a rickety chair. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was fading, replaced by bone-deep weariness. She set her pistol on the table, barrel angled away in case she needed it. Then she let her head droop, breathing in shallow gasps. Just a moment to rest. She slipped into a semi-conscious haze, dreamlike flashes of faces, Ortiz, Carl, her old SEAL teammates floating in the darkness. A faint sound roused her. At first, she thought it was part of the dream, but it grew more insistent. Footsteps? A muffled voice? She jerked awake, cursing the fresh pain in her shoulder. The sun had shifted, indicating at least half an hour had passed. She grabbed her pistol, scanning the room. The footsteps came from outside on the porch. A silhouette darkened the doorway. Panic seized her. Could it be a wolf? The figure stepped inside and Rachel's eyes widened in confusion. It was a woman, middle-aged, wearing dusty jeans and boots, a bandana over her graying hair. She froze at the sight of Rachel aiming a gun. "Who the hell?" the woman blurted, raising her hands. Rachel forced her voice steady, though it trembled with pain. "Don't move." The woman's wide eyes flicked to Rachel's injuries, then back to the gun. "Look, I'm not armed. I'm just checking on my property. I own this old line shack. Thought maybe coyotes got in." Rachel studied her. No wolf patch, no policeman's uniform. "Property," she echoed, mind hazy. The woman nodded, slowly lowering her hands. "Yes, ma'am. Name's Joan Barlow. I ranch about 5 miles that way." She pointed vaguely south. "We keep this old shack for storing feet sometimes. Saw your footprints, so I came to see who broke in." Rachel's pistol hand shook. She lowered it a fraction. "I'm sorry. I needed shelter. I've been shot." Joan's eyes widened at the blood-stained jacket, the bruises and exhaustion etched into Rachel's face. She stepped forward cautiously. "Let me help you, honey. I got a first aid kit in my ATV." Rachel swallowed, tears of relief and pain threatening to spill. "Please. I have no water, Aya." Joan nodded, face softening. "Easy now. Put that gun away and I'll fetch my supplies." With trembling fingers, Rachel engaged the safety and set the pistol aside. Joan stepped out briefly, returning with a battered metal box and a water jug. She knelt beside Rachel, offering the jug first. Rachel drank greedily, wincing as the water stung her parched throat. "Thank you," she croaked. Joan nodded, setting to work on the shoulder wound with surprising competence. She cut away the ragged sleeve, cleaning the gash with antiseptic. Rachel gritted her teeth, tears sliding down her cheeks from the sting. Joan worked methodically. "Bullet grazed you, right? Doesn't look like it's in there. You'll need stitches eventually, but let's get it sterile and bandaged." Rachel let out a shaky exhale. "Thank you," she repeated. Once bandaged, she drank more water, explaining haltingly that she was fleeing dangerous men in Shadow Creek. Joan's brows knitted. "I heard rumors about that place. The desert wolves. Thought they mostly kept to themselves, but guess not." Rachel forced a bitter laugh. "They're a criminal empire, and I got on their bad side. The local cops are in on it." Joan's expression hardened. "Figures. Heard the place is rotten. I mind my business out here, but I don't abide by criminals." She helped Rachel to her feet. "Come on. Let's get you to my ranch. It ain't much, but I got a phone. We can call for help." A surge of hope filled Rachel, tempered by caution. "Are you sure it's safe? The wolves might track me." Joan shrugged. "They rarely come out this far, and if they do, my folks know how to handle trouble. My son's a good shot, and we got neighbors who watch out for each other." Rachel's legs trembled. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Joan patted her shoulder gently. "Don't go counting debts yet. Let's get you stable." They walked outside to an ATV parked near the shack. Joan helped Rachel onto the passenger seat. The jolt of starting the engine made Rachel gasp, but she held on. They trundled across the open desert, a path only Joan seemed to know. Rolling hills and scrub brush gave way to a modest ranch house in a small valley, fenced pastures stretching behind it, dotted with grazing cattle. The single-story house had a wraparound porch, sun-bleached paint, and a few pickup trucks in the driveway. A ranch hand paused from loading feed, eyeing them with surprise. Joan waved. "Just a friend who needs help," she called out. The man nodded, returning to his task. Inside, the house was cozy, wooden floors, a large living area with leather chairs, pictures of Joan's family on the walls. A tall teenage boy hurried over, worry etched on his features. "Mom, who's this?" "Her name's Rachel," Joan explained. "She's been hurt." "Rory, get the first aid kit again and a blanket. Maybe some soup if we got any left over." Rory nodded, darting off. Joan eased Rachel onto a couch. "We'll fix you up. Then you can make that call." Tears of relief threatened again. Rachel blinked them back, inhaling the comforting scent of home cooking lingering in the air. She looked at Joan, voice trembling. "You have no idea how grateful I am." Joan gave a small smile. "I might be old, but I'm not heartless. If there's bad folk after you, we'll do what's right." Rachel swallowed thickly. "Thank you." Within an hour, they'd cleaned Rachel's wounds more thoroughly. Rory brought her a steaming bowl of chicken soup, which she devoured. Joan's phone was an old landline, but the dial tone was strong. Rachel dialed Tom Grayson's number again, praying he'd answer. This time, he picked up on the second ring. "Hello?" Relief rushed through her, tears stinging her eyes. "Tom, it's Rachel. Thank God. I'm in trouble really bad." His voice sharpened. "Rachel? Where are you?" She gave him a brief rundown of Shadow Creek's corruption, the desert wolves, the footage they'd lost, and the printed pages they still had. She told him about Deputy Ortiz, Carl, and the attempts to get help. "I'm at a ranch outside town, but I can't stay. They'll come for me." Tom's tone was grim. "I'll put in calls to people I trust at the FBI field office in Phoenix. Also, I know a contact in the Arizona DPS. He's a stand-up guy. We can get a joint task force going, but it'll take time to mobilize. Maybe 24 hours, hopefully less." Rachel's heart hammered. "That's too long. They could do a lot of damage by then." "I know. But once we have federal involvement, the local PD can't hide behind their corruption. The real question, can you hold out until we arrive? I'll drive down personally, meet the feds." She glanced at Joan, who overheard some of the conversation. The rancher gave a single, firm nod as if saying, "We'll stand by you." Rachel exhaled shakily. "Yes, I'll stay put as long as I can. But be quick, Tom. They're lethal." "I'm on it. Text me the address if you have a phone. Otherwise, stay by the landline. I'll contact you with updates. Don't let it ring more than twice before picking up. Keep it safe from eavesdroppers." "Understood," Rachel said, breath catching. "Thank you." They ended the call. Joan raised an eyebrow. "Friends in high places?" Rachel nodded. "A retired FBI agent who still has connections. He's calling in the cavalry. But it might be a day or two." Joan's eyes flickered with a mix of worry and determination. "We can hide you until then. I'll warn my neighbors to keep an eye out." Rory approached, fiddling with his hat. "Ma, if them wolves come, we can't fight 'em off alone." Joan placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're not alone, son. We got Old Man Dempsey's ranch next door, the Carters across the way. Everyone's armed out here. If the wolves try a siege, they'll face a rude awakening." Rachel, deeply touched, felt hope rising. "I just don't want y'all in harm's way because of me." Joan squared her jaw. "We ranch folk look out for each other. We've dealt with rustlers, corporate land grabbers, all sorts of nonsense. Maybe not an entire biker gang, but we won't be bullied." Despite everything, a tiny smile curved Rachel's lips. She pictured a modern-day Western standoff. Honest ranchers banding together to repel lawless marauders. It gave her a sense of moral clarity she hadn't felt in days. Now she just had to pray Davis, Hightower, and the wolves wouldn't pinpoint her location too soon. By mid-afternoon, Rachel had dozed intermittently on Joan's couch, recovering some strength. Joan insisted on redressing the shoulder wound, applying a makeshift suture with a needle and sterilized thread. It was excruciating but necessary to close the gash. Rachel's battered ribs were taped as well, mitigating some movement pain. Outside, the ranch was a flurry of quiet preparations. Joan had called her neighbors, alerting them to a potential threat. Several had driven up to coordinate. A ragtag group of ranchers formed a plan. If suspicious vehicles approached, they'd position themselves at vantage points to deter an attack. The entire time, Rachel's stomach churned with guilt. These people were risking their lives for a stranger. But Joan seemed resolute. "We don't let good folks get slaughtered out here," she declared. In late afternoon, the phone rang. Joan answered on the second ring, then waved Rachel over. "It's for you, from your friend." Rachel took it. "Tom." His voice crackled with tension. "Yes, I got through to Special Agent Caroline DuPont in Phoenix. She's launching an urgent inquiry. She'll coordinate with Arizona DPS for an armed response. They'll be on the road tomorrow morning, at the latest, to converge on Shadow Creek." Rachel's shoulders sagged in relief. "That's incredible news. So we just need to hang tight for 24 hours. "That's the idea," Tom confirmed. "How secure is your location?" Rachel eyed Joan, who was stockpiling rifles by the door. "We have local ranchers forming a perimeter. It's not exactly Fort Knox, but it's something." Tom's voice was grave. "Watch your back. The wolves might guess you'd seek help outside town. They might scan the outskirts or ranches. If the local PD is in on it, they could use official channels to track you." "Understood," Rachel said. "We'll be ready." They hung up. That left them in a tense waiting game. The ranchers hammered out vantage points. 2 men on horseback patrolled near the property line. A pair of old pickups stationed at the south approach, binoculars scanning for dust trails. Rachel helped where she could, though her battered condition limited heavy lifting. Mostly, she coordinated with Joan, going over strategies if an assault came. As evening fell, a quiet unease settled. No calls from Ortiz or Carl. Rachel worried that they might assume she was dead, or maybe they'd been captured. She still had the folded evidence in her jacket, determined not to let it out of her sight. Around 8 p.m., a flicker of headlights shimmered across the valley. A rancher shouted from his pickup, "Vehicle approaching from the south." Tension snapped taut. Rachel stepped onto the porch, gun at her hip. Joan grabbed a shotgun. Rory, face pale but resolute, stood behind them. A single pickup rumbled closer. Then a familiar shape hopped out. Ortiz. Relief flooded Rachel. She hurried forward, ignoring the pang in her shoulder. Ortiz and Carl were both there, Carl driving, Ortiz stepping from the passenger seat. "Rachel!" Ortiz exclaimed, spotting her. "You're alive!" They embraced gingerly. "I thought you got away," Rachel breathed. "What happened after the blockade?" Ortiz sighed. "We made it through, but then we realized you hadn't followed. We circled back, spent hours searching. We spotted the brush fire, wolves scouring the desert. Eventually, we concluded you'd escaped on foot. Carl thought you might be dead, but I refused to believe it." Carl stepped forward, tipping his cap at Joan. "I asked around some ranchers, found out Ms. Jones said she took in a wounded traveler. We guessed it might be you. We had to confirm." Joan exhaled a shaky laugh. "Well, we're all here now. Hope your arrival didn't lead any trouble my way." Ortiz's face turned grim. "We tried to keep a low profile, but we saw a pair of bikes in the distance. Might have been wolves tailing us. We took some back routes, lost them in the hills, I think." Rachel cursed under her breath. "They could show up any time then." Joan nodded resolutely. "We'll be ready." They sat around Joan's kitchen table under a bare light bulb, planning. The ranchers had at least 10 people scattered around neighboring properties, each armed. Ortiz explained how the wolves might coordinate with local cops, meaning that official vehicles could also arrive. They mapped out likely approach routes. Rachel insisted that if things got too hot, everyone should evacuate. But Joan scoffed, stating she'd stand her ground. Night descended into a tense vigil. Rachel dozed in a chair near the window, pistol on her lap. Ortiz paced restlessly. Carl smoked a cigarette out on the porch, scanning the darkness. Joan brewed coffee in a tin pot on the stove. The ranchers radioed updates every hour, No sign of suspicious vehicles. Time dragged. Midnight passed. Then 1 a.m., 2 a.m. The ranch fell silent except for the occasional lowing of cattle. For a moment, Rachel almost believed they would make it through the night unchallenged. She pictured the cavalry arriving at dawn, sweeping into Shadow Creek, arresting Davis, Hightower, and the entire Desert Wolves gang. Then, around 3 a.m., the call came from a rancher posted a mile away. 3 vehicles heading your way. No headlights. Looks like SUVs or trucks. Rachel stiffened. Ortiz hurried to the porch, radio in hand, while Joan roused the men who'd been napping in the bunkhouse. Showtime. Rachel forced her battered body upright, ignoring the lance of pain in her ribs. She double-checked her pistol, 1 partial magazine plus 1 backup with 6 rounds. Ortiz had maybe 10 rounds left. Carl had the shotgun with 4 shells. Joan's ranchers collectively had half a dozen rifles, some old revolvers. Not an army, but enough to put up a fight. Within minutes, headlights flared in the distance. 2 black SUVs plus a pickup. They rolled down the dirt track toward the ranch, engines a low growl in the darkness. The ranchers formed a loose blockade of their own. 2 trucks parked across the road, men crouched behind them with rifles aimed. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. Several figures emerged, silhouettes in the headlights. One stepped forward, calling out, "We're looking for a fugitive. Hand her over, and nobody gets hurt. Captain Davis." Rachel recognized his baritone. Joan raised a bullhorn. "You're trespassing on private property. State your business properly or turn around." Davis's laugh echoed. "I'm the law in Shadow Creek. There's a dangerous criminal in your midst, Rachel Morrison. She's wanted for multiple homicides. Harboring her is a felony. Step aside and let us do our job." Rachel, from her vantage at a side window, clenched her teeth. "So now it's murder charges?" she muttered. "They're desperate." Ortiz joined her, voice low. "He's lying, but these ranchers might not know that." Joan's voice rang back. "We don't trust your claim, Captain. You got a warrant? Judges? Paperwork?" A second voice chimed in, Detective Hightower. "We don't need a damn warrant. She's armed and dangerous. This is your last warning." A hush fell. The ranchers stared across the headlights. Davis, Hightower, and presumably more wolves or crooked cops waited. None of them retreated. Tension coiled, ready to snap. Joan calmly responded, "Then I guess we're at an impasse. Leave now or we'll defend this property." For a moment, no one moved. Then a single gunshot split the night, a muzzle flash from Davis's SUV. The bullet pinged off a rancher's truck. Instantly, the ranchers fired back, the night exploding in muzzle flashes and roaring echoes. Davis's side dove for cover behind their vehicles, returning sporadic fire. Rachel gripped her pistol. "We have to keep them pinned. They can't flank us." Ortiz nodded, already heading outside. Rachel followed, hugging the shadows of the porch. The bullets whistled overhead, slamming into wood and dirt. She spotted Hightower leaning around an SUV door, firing at a rancher. She fired 2 shots in his direction, forcing him back. Ortiz did the same, emptying half a magazine to keep them from advancing. Joan's neighbors shot from behind hay bales, forcing the intruders to hunker down. The staccato exchange lit up the ranch yard in bursts of orange. Rachel's ears rang. She advanced to a corner of the porch, using a wooden pillar as partial cover. The adrenaline overcame her exhaustion. This was it, the final showdown. A wolf biker tried circling left, sprinting across open ground with an assault rifle. Rachel squeezed off 3 rounds, hitting him in the leg. He went down hard, weapon clattering. Another man rushed to drag him behind an SUV, cursing. The smell of gunpowder and kicked-up dirt filled the air. The ranch's defenders held the advantage of cover and farmland they knew intimately. The intruders had night vision scopes on at least one rifle, though. Rachel saw a green beam scanning the yard. She ducked behind the porch as bullets chewed into the wooden railing. Carl, crouched behind a fence post, fired the shotgun, hitting a man who ventured too close. Ortiz reloaded, panting. A bullet splintered the porch near her head, showering her with wood fragments. She returned fire, hitting the front grille of the intruder's pickup, steam billowing as the radiator was pierced. Davis shouted above the din, "Enough of this! Bring out the heavy stuff!" A deputy emerged from the second SUV, brandishing a tear gas launcher. Rachel's stomach lurched. They planned to flush the defenders out. The deputy fired a canister that sailed in a low arc, landing near the bunkhouse. White smoke billowed. Some ranchers coughed, stumbling back. Rachel drew on old training, pulling her jacket collar up over her mouth. She signaled Ortiz to do the same. Another canister soared, landing near the porch steps. A stinging cloud enveloped them. Her eyes watered, lungs burning. Through the haze, she saw shapes moving. The intruders advanced under cover of the tear gas. She fired blindly to keep them back, but her magazine clicked empty. She fumbled for her last spare mag, only a few rounds left. Ortiz coughed violently beside her, also struggling with limited ammunition. A rancher next to the barn unleashed a hail of rifle fire, momentarily halting the assault. But the gas spread quickly. Rachel's vision blurred, tears streaming down her cheeks. She choked, every breath in agony. She heard someone shouting, "Fall back to the house!" The defenders were being pushed into retreat. Rachel staggered through the swirling gas, reaching the door. Her side felt numb with pain, and black spots danced across her vision. She barely registered Ortiz hauling her inside. Someone slammed the door, trying to keep the fumes out. But a window shattered, letting more smoke swirl in. Joan barked orders. "Close up! Wet rags over your faces!" Ranchers scrambled, but the intruders were closing in. Shots rang out, piercing the walls. Plaster fell from the ceiling, furniture splintered. The ranch house was becoming a death trap. Rory, the teenage boy, huddled behind an overturned table, rifle trembling in his hands. Carl crouched beside him, reloading the shotgun with shaking fingers. "We can't hold them off forever," he gasped. Rachel forced herself to stand, blinking away tears. Her wounded shoulder throbbed, blood spotting her bandage. She coughed, voice ragged. "Hold them just a bit longer. The feds will come. We just need to." A massive crash cut her off. A pickup rammed the front porch, sending wood and debris flying. The wall cracked. The ranch defenders fired wildly through the smoke. Rachel glimpsed men jumping from the truck bed, wolf patches visible. The final push had begun. All or nothing. Rachel fired her last rounds, dropping a wolf who tried to come through the shattered window. Ortiz's gun clicked empty, and she ducked to find more ammo on a fallen rancher. Joan fired her shotgun point blank at a deputy climbing onto the porch, knocking him backward. But a bullet caught Joan in the thigh, and she cried out, collapsing. "Mom!" Rory screamed, rushing to her side. Another bullet shattered a lamp above them, showering sparks. The scene was chaos, smoke, gunfire, yelling. Rachel grabbed Carl's shotgun. "Cover me," she barked. He nodded, taking her pistol. With the shotgun braced, she advanced toward the half-demolished door. A wolf biker stepped in, rifle raised. She blasted him in the torso. Another wolf shoved aside the corpse, letting loose a barrage of bullets. She dove to the floor, bits of wood raining down. Amid the carnage, Davis's voice rang out from outside. "Morrison, it's over. Surrender or I'll torch the whole damn ranch." Rachel coughed violently, chest tight, tears streaming from the gas. She knew Davis was capable of arson or worse. These men wouldn't stop unless they had her in cuffs or a body bag. She crawled to the kitchen, where Ortiz tried to stanch Joan's bleeding. "Rachel, she's losing a lot of blood. We have to get her out of here." Rachel's mind spun. "Out the back door. We'll cover you. Then we regroup at the barn or in the fields." She paused, hearing the defenders' gunfire dwindle. Ammunition was almost gone. The intruders had the advantage in numbers and gear. The ranchers fought valiantly, but they were outclassed. A chunk of the ceiling collapsed, flames licking overhead. Rachel's heart constricted. They must have thrown an incendiary device or the gas ignited. The house was on fire. Smoke thickened, rolling through the hallway. Already, tongues of flame licked the walls. A meltdown was imminent. "Move, move!" Rachel shouted, half-dragging Joan while Ortiz guided them. Rory followed, tears streaking his ash-smudged face. Carl and 2 other ranchers provided cover, firing through windows to keep the wolves from pushing inside. They retreated toward the back entrance, a small mudroom now thick with smoke. Rachel kicked the door open. Fresh air rushed in, though it carried the bitter tang of tear gas. She led them outside. The darkness was lit by the orange glow of flames rising from the ranch house. Over the cacophony of gunshots, she heard more engines, reinforcements, or maybe the wolves' shifting position. They took cover behind a horse trough, lying Joan carefully on the ground. Blood seeped from her thigh, and her face was pale. She waved off help, wincing. "Just keep them away from my son." Rory knelt, pressing a cloth to the wound, tears in his eyes. Ortiz hovered, desperately searching for more bandages. Carl and the other ranchers stumbled out next, eyes streaming. The front of the house was fully ablaze now, an inferno that cast dancing shadows across the yard. A Wolf SUV circled around, headlights sweeping. The unstoppable tide of attackers was at hand. Rachel's arms trembled with fatigue, the shotgun feeling heavier with each breath. She forced a bitter laugh of disbelief. After all this, they'd die in a rural standoff, waiting for feds who might arrive too late. But she'd die fighting if she had to. Then, out of nowhere, a thunderous whop-whop-whop vibrated the air. Bright beams of light strafed across the yard from above. Rachel's head jerked skyward, adrenaline jolting. A helicopter. The spotlight swept over the ranch. Another searchlight joined, bathing the entire property in harsh white glare. Over a loudspeaker, a crisp female voice boomed, "This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. All armed individuals, drop your weapons and surrender immediately." The abrupt arrival stunned both defenders and attackers. The wolves scrambled, some firing at the helicopter. The searchlights pinned them. Another voice crackled on a bullhorn from the dirt road. "Arizona DPS, lay down your arms." Rachel's heart soared with sudden hope. They came early. Somehow, Tom and the feds arrived ahead of schedule. A convoy of vehicles poured onto the property, red and blue lights flashing, armed troopers jumping out. The crack of new gunfire erupted, precision shots dropping wolves who resisted. Others threw down their rifles, seeing the hopelessness of fighting a combined federal and state assault from land and air. Captain Davis, pinned behind a burning pickup, tried to flee. An FBI agent tackled him, slamming him to the ground. Hightower shot at troopers from behind the SUV, only to be winged in the shoulder by a marksman. He collapsed, screaming curses. The desert wolves who remained either surrendered or fell in frantic shootouts with federal agents. Rachel and the ranchers sank to their knees, relief and exhaustion flooding through them. The cavalry had arrived at the 11th hour. Smoke billowed from the burning house as troopers and FBI agents secured the scene, disarming the battered criminals. The helicopter's searchlight still roamed overhead, illuminating the carnage. Moments later, An SUV pulled up near the horse trough. Out stepped Tom Grayson, wearing a bulletproof vest, his face drawn with worry. He rushed to Rachel. "You okay?" he yelled over the din. She nodded, tears welling. "Better now. Joan's hurt. Get her medical help." Paramedics rushed in, loading Joan onto a stretcher. Rory hovered, trembling with relief. Ortiz and Carl collapsed, leaning on each other, tears of exhaustion and gratitude. The ranchers, battered and bruised, welcomed the paramedics' assistance. The entire yard was a scene of smoke, lights, and frantic medical triage. Tom's eyes shone with fierce pride. "We came as fast as we could. Agent DuPont pulled strings to get a chopper from the state. We had enough to launch a full-scale raid on the desert wolves." He looked around at the bullet-riddled trucks, the blazing ruin of the ranch house. "Sorry we weren't faster." Rachel managed a small, tearful smile. "You saved lives." She sank onto the ground, letting the shotgun slip from her grasp. "Thank you." He squeezed her uninjured shoulder gently, then gestured to the FBI agents streaming in. "We'll handle the arrests. My advice, let the paramedics look at you. You look half dead." Rachel closed her eyes as the wave of relief washed over her. The fight was over. The desert wolves had been cornered, their corrupt allies in cuffs. Everything they'd risked, scouring the library's drive, printing evidence, surviving ambush after ambush, had culminated in this final stand. They had won. Morning brought the acrid smell of still smoldering timbers where Joan's ranch house once stood. The helicopter had departed, replaced by a steady stream of flashing lights. Officers from the Arizona Department of Public Safety, alongside FBI agents, combed the area. They collected shell casings, took witness statements, and transported wounded criminals to an emergency ward under guard. Captain Davis and Detective Hightower were among those arrested, sporting their own injuries. Rachel sat on the tailgate of an FBI truck, a paramedic rechecking her shoulder bandage. Ortiz leaned beside her, and IV drip in her arm to treat dehydration and the tear gas effects. Carl hovered close, sipping a bottle of water. A wave of ranchers milled about, giving statements. Some comforted Joan's son, who would stay with neighbors until the place could be rebuilt. Joan herself was stable, recovering from surgery in the nearest hospital. The bullet in her thigh hadn't hit bone. She would walk again. Agent Caroline DuPont, a tall woman with curly hair pinned back, approached with a serious expression. "Ms. Morrison, Ms. Ortiz, I wanted to formally commend you for your bravery. We've uncovered extensive corruption in Shadow Creek PD and this entire region. We'll be filing federal charges against numerous officers and the Desert Wolves. It appears you two were instrumental in revealing this operation." Rachel nodded, exhaustion tugging at her. "Thank you, Agent. I'm just glad it's over." DuPont offered a thin smile. "There's still a mountain of paperwork and trial proceedings ahead. You'll likely be called to testify, but for now, rest. We have enough evidence from the arrests, plus your documents, to bury them." Ortiz exhaled, relief mingled with sorrow. "I can't believe it's finally done. What about the cartel connections?" DuPont's eyes narrowed. "We have leads. The Wolves have been naming suppliers in exchange for lesser charges. We'll disrupt that pipeline, hopefully crippling the cartel's distribution in this region." Carl cleared his throat. "What about the good cops? The ones who didn't know or were forced to keep quiet?" DuPont gave a sober nod. "We'll do a thorough investigation. Anyone found innocent of wrongdoing will be reinstated or reassigned. The city council will likely disband the Shadow Creek PD, bring in county or state-level oversight. It'll be a big shakeup." Rachel felt a pang of sympathy for the honest few. Wyatt's face flashed in her mind, the young deputy who'd let them go in the evidence room. She hoped he'd come out okay. but it was a necessary purge to weed out the corruption. DuPont patted Rachel's good shoulder gently. We'll get statements from you in detail later. For now, paramedics say you need a real hospital for your wounds. Let me know if you need transport. We can also arrange safe housing if you're concerned about retaliation. Rachel glanced at Ortiz, Carl, and the battered ranchers. A pang of longing for peace soared through her. I do need medical care. Then I plan on some serious rest. But no safe house. I think the biggest threat has been neutralized. The agent nodded. Understood. You have my card. Call if you need anything. She turned to go, leaving Rachel, Ortiz, and Carl in a weary huddle. A breeze stirred the dust, carrying the lingering stench of smoke. The moment felt surreal, like the end of a war. Rachel replayed the events in her mind, from the gas station altercation to the final siege. She'd never have predicted such chaos from a simple pit stop on a Kawasaki Ninja. Ortiz spoke quietly. Rachel, thank you. Really. You saved my life more times than I can count. Rachel's eyes glistened. Likewise, you pulled me out of that cell. Without you, none of this would have been exposed. Carl finished his water, stepping forward. Guess this is where we all part ways, huh? Rachel forced a small smile. Maybe not forever. I'd like to pay you back for your kindness, Carl, once I'm on my feet. He shrugged. Just live a good life. That's all I need. She clasped his hand. I'll do my best. Paramedic waved from an ambulance. Ms. Morrison, we're ready to take you to the hospital if you're coming. Rachel slid off the tailgate. Her legs wobbled, but Ortiz steadied her. Want me to come along? The deputy asked. Rachel nodded. If you don't mind, maybe we can share a room, she half-joked. Voice cracked from all the tear gas and strain. They moved to the ambulance, exhaustion swallowing them. As they settled inside, the doors closed with a clang. Ortiz looked at Rachel, her eyes reflecting days of trauma, relief, and an unspoken bond forged in the fires of conflict. We made it, Ortiz whispered. Rachel squeezed her hand. We did. The engine rumbled, carrying them away from the battered ranch. With each passing mile, a sense of closure enveloped Rachel. The desert wolves had mocked the wrong woman that day at Johnson's gas station, thinking she was just another target, an easy mark on a flashy bike. Instead, they'd ignited a chain reaction that toppled their empire, ripped apart a web of corruption, and liberated a town from fear. In the end, they'd learned a brutal lesson about judging a book by its cover. This lone woman was a seal, molded by trials they could never fathom, a soldier whose quiet resolve carried the power to shatter a criminal empire. And now, as the desert sun climbed higher, painting the landscape in vivid gold, Rachel Morrison finally allowed herself to close her eyes. Not in fear, but in the warmth of triumph. The war was over. Justice, however hard won, had prevailed. Epilogue. Rebuilding Shadow Creek. 3 months later, the scorching Arizona summer had given way to cooler autumn breezes. Rachel Morrison drove a rental car along Highway 87, heading back to the place she once fled. Her shoulder was healing well, physical therapy helping restore full range of motion. A faint scar remained, a permanent reminder of the bullet's near miss. The new city council had invited her, along with Deputy Ortiz, to attend a small ceremony marking the reestablishment of law enforcement in the region. The FBI and state troopers had thoroughly dismantled the old department, arresting over a dozen officers. Captain Davis and Detective Hightower faced federal charges, as did numerous members of the Desert Wolves. The cartel pipeline was disrupted, if not entirely eradicated. Rachel parked near what used to be the Shadow Creek police station, now gutted, soon to be repurposed. A handful of media vans were parked along the curb. People gathered on the sidewalk, wearing cautious smiles. Ortiz was already there, wearing a crisp uniform from the newly formed Shadow Creek County Substation under direct county supervision. She brightened at the sight of Rachel. "You made it," Ortiz called, stepping over. "Looking good, Captain." Rachel returned the smile. "Likewise, Deputy. How's the new job?" Ortiz let out a breath, glancing around at the partial construction. "Better. They're serious about oversight. We have county officials visiting weekly, plus body cams, transparency measures. It's a whole new world." Rachel nodded with approval. "They're lucky to have you." The ceremony was short. Local officials gave speeches about integrity and fresh beginnings. Rachel and Ortiz received plaques thanking them for their heroism, although Rachel had politely protested any spotlight. Nevertheless, the townspeople insisted. They recognized how her involvement had sparked the chain of events leading to the Wolves' downfall. After the ceremony, Rachel wandered to Johnson's gas station, the place where it had all begun. The sun hung low in the sky, bathing the desert in warm hues. She walked inside, half expecting some ghost of the past. Instead, she found a newly installed security camera, a fresh coat of paint, and a cautious optimism among the patrons. She bought a bottle of water, heart twisting at the memory of that day. The station's clerk recognized her, gave a shy nod, and didn't charge her. Outside, leaning against the pump, Rachel sipped the water. The red rock formations in the distance shimmered with a kind of timeless serenity. She recalled her first impression of this place. Dusty, unremarkable, overshadowed by menace. Now it felt different, freed. She heard a familiar rumble. Turning, she smiled at the sight of her Kawasaki Ninja, newly released from impound. It had needed repairs after weeks of neglect, but a local mechanic had volunteered to fix it gratis, calling it a small thank you. Rachel walked over, ran her hand along the bike's sleek frame. A sense of completion washed over her. Ortiz joined her. "Heading out soon?" Rachel nodded. "Figured I'd ride around a bit, maybe see the ranch, check on Joan." Ortiz's face softened. "She's been living with her son at a neighbor's while they rebuild. She'd love a visit." A pause. "Stay for dinner, maybe?" Rachel weighed the invitation. Part of her yearned to remain, to see Shadow Creek truly reborn. Another part of her missed the open road, the life of a wanderer. She gave Ortiz a gentle, reassuring smile. "I'd like that, but eventually I have to keep moving. I left a lot of things unfinished in my life." Ortiz accepted that with a nod of understanding. "No matter what, you're always welcome here." Rachel gripped the ninja's handlebars. "Thanks, Deputy, for everything." She started the engine, feeling its familiar vibration thrumming through her body. Ortiz stepped back, saluting playfully. Rachel returned a casual wave. Then she eased onto the highway, desert wind rushing past. The horizon stretched before her, open and full of possibility. In her mirror, she saw the outline of Shadow Creek diminishing behind her. The town had changed. So had she. The desert's unforgiving expanse still beckoned, but now Rachel carried a sense of purpose rekindled, a conviction that even the darkest corners of the world could be brought into the light, provided one person had the will to stand against evil. 3 bikers had mocked the wrong woman that day. They'd paid the ultimate price, and so had their entire criminal empire. And as Captain Rachel Morrison roared across the asphalt into a blazing Arizona sunset, she carried the silent satisfaction that, for all the chaos and pain, justice had finally prevailed in Shadow Creek, and the ghosts of that abandoned gas station confrontation could at last rest in peace.